Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just start the session in another 2-3 minutes. Kindly bear with us.
Happy afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Mr. Singhi. This is Subhash from CII. We have the panelists here. Mr. Apuru Gupta is just joining us. You can start with the session, sir.
Happy afternoon, everyone.
Mr. Singhi, can you hear me?
Hello.
Mr. Singhi, are you able to hear me? This is Subhash Sapru from CII.
Yes.
This is Subhash from CII. We have the panelists here. Mr. Apuru Gupta is just joining us. You can start with the session, sir.
Okay. Happy afternoon, all the panelists and participants. Namaskar. It's great to have you all here for one of the manufacturing industry's flagship event organized by CII. I think this session is very important as it also talks of a dialogue with change maker, and we are very fortunate that we have panelists who have really made the changes not only in their sector but in the overall industry also. So I'm so happy to welcome my dear all panelists as well as the expert from BCG, Mr. Michel from France. Friends, I'll just start the session by quoting Mr. Robert Swan, renowned explorer and the first man in the history to walk both North and South poles, who famously said, "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." But the good part is the panelists who are here, as well as many people who are attending this program, They have already started making the change, and they are not depending on others, but they are depending on their own. Now, the role of such change makers becomes even more important in a net zero committed world towards the delivery of positive mindset, policies, strategies, technology, and financial models to meet the commitment. And in fact, I would just like to share the outcome of COP26, which is one of the important platform, one of the important mechanism by which we can think of what environment, what climate can make the impact on the whole world, not of today, but the tomorrow. The COP26 outcome also focuses on the new green economy, as more than 90% of global GDP is now committed to net zero. It's a big thing that 90% of global GDP is committed to net zero. It also resulted in the finalization of the Paris rulebook, joint policy commitments on deforestation, methane, and to make available 130 trillion US dollar finance from Glasgow Financial Alliance. COP also witnessed collaboration and delivery of critical partnerships from the public and private sectors, such as Glasgow Breakthrough, First Movers Coalition, Breakthrough Energy Catalyst, Green Public Procurement, and One Sun, One World, and One Grid. And I think all these initiatives which have come out of COP would be great enablers for our manufacturing industry to become one of the most cleanest manufacturing industry also. I would also like to highlight that our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji also committed to an ambitious five-part Panchvrata pledge. And one of the important is to reduce the emissions intensity of GDP by 45% by 2030. And that will also have the major role from the industry also. Similarly, another one is to reach 500 gigawatt of non-fossil electricity capacity and few others also. Naturally, India's commitments are critical foundation in the global pathway to achieving ambitious 1.5 degree global warming target. Of course, still there's uncertainty whether it will be 2 degree, 2.5 degree, 1.5 degree, but then yes, our efforts are on, collective efforts are on that how we can target 1.5 degree. The union budget also this time also makes significant headway by introducing low carbon economy as a core policy for our Indian economy. But at the same time, for a developing country like India, few may see strong climate actions as a trade-off, one that become at the expense of robust economic growth. So I think we all have to think whether the targets like net zero will compromise economic development, job creation, or it will happen otherwise. I think our panelists will also discuss how these commitments and these actions will in fact bring more employment, bring up more economic progress. Certainly, India's long-term development pathways may not be replicable to other countries, and the same would apply to India as well. Our Honorable Prime Minister has also set an ambitious growth target to take the GDP to $5 trillion by 2026. In economic terms, it essentially means creating another India within few years time frame. And this is what has been again reiterated by our Industries Minister just a few minutes back, that we all have to work, and then manufacturing sector has to play very, very big role, and they have to increase their overall share to almost 20 to 25%. Now, friends, point is what we need to do, what we have to now work on it. So this will definitely help us in understanding that what are the actions industry would be taking, what are the actions we can expect from the government, from the civil society. I firmly believe that we have the potential to become the leading manufacturing hub of the globe. Our industry is agile, economical, accessible, environment friendly, and can amplify actions on lowering GHG footprints. Now, good part is that Government of India and their policies, they are coming forward to support these actions and ambitions. Besides, the technological emphasis on green hydrogen and renewable electricity has taken good shape already. The government is progressing with meticulous details and speed, and surely we will hear from our experts and panelists that what are their thought process on green hydrogen and renewable power. We do know that low carbon transition will require massive investments in power, industry, transport, and hydrogen. And I think the one of the major statement which came from Mr. Mukesh Ambani is that yes, this green transition is basically in energy transition, or the climate crisis is basically energy crisis, and how we as Indians can work on it. Friends, early policy signals like mandate for renewable energy, electricity mobility, and industrial fuels have accelerated technology adoption by industry, benefiting decreasing technology cost. So now I'm sure my fellow panelists and friends, they will now speak. They will share their thoughts that what they have done already in their sector, what do they expect from the sector and from the other collaborators. So we will be having great benefit today to understand from them, which can also give good messages to all the participants that what can be done, and the government of India as well as the Indian public can have good confidence that we have such change makers who will bring the positive change. In addition to our panelists, we have the good fortune to have Mr. Michel. He is one of the expert on climate change globally. He is one of the leading member of BCG as well. He also aligns and he also supports World Economic Forum, COP, and other major organizations globally, as well as one of the important European ministry to make out their policies on clean climate, on green journey. So I would now surely request Mr. Michel to address us, share few thoughts, and thereafter my panelist friends, they will share their ideas, their thoughts, and then again at the end, we will request Michel to give his thoughts on what he has heard from all of us. So may I now request Mr. Michel that please share your thoughts about not only clean climate, but for India also.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You hear me well? It's
Yes.
well connected. Okay. Very pleased to be with you and very honored. Thank you for your nice introduction. So maybe you can show some of the slides that I've prepared. I don't know who is running the show. But the first message coming back from the COP, I think is important because the COP is really setting the speed and the general atmosphere of what's going on. So the good news is that, as you know, 90 countries representing 80% of the emissions have committed to a net zero. So you might, argue when you look at the details that we're still in a trajectory that is way above the well below 2 degrees that we all agreed on, and it's depending on how you see it between 2.1 and 2.4. However, I think that clearly now that most of the transparency elements linked to the Paris rule book have been agreed, I think there's nowhere to hide, and there will be more and more transparency. So not only the pledges are moving forward, and those countries that are laggards will be asked to review every year their pledges, but we all know, as you were saying, Mahindra, that it's not enough to do pledges. You need policies behind it, and you need financing behind it. So the state are really under pressure now to, behind their NDCs, develop the right policies and the right financing. The good news at the COP is the mobilizations of corporates, of your companies, getting into net zero and basically saying to the state, as I said, give us the right policies because we're ready to move and we can accelerate if we've got the right context. And in fact, why are corporates so mobilized beyond, their responsibility as citizen and as part of this world? I think that what we've done with the World Economic Forum this year was to interview those climate leaders and ask, are you starting seeing some advantages of being a first mover? And this is what we got, which is the next slide, which is clearly that you can see around the world a number of arguments and a number of dimensions on which climate leaders see emerging an advantage. So of course, climate is a risk, but at the same time, for all corporations, and in particular in India, I would argue, it's also a major opportunity. So what we see is that there is clearly a hiring advantage on the people side. And I could argue that those companies that don't get serious in terms of their journey on climate and environment will lose people. So here there's an opportunity, but there's also a risk not doing it. Some start seeing higher revenues through opportunities that the climate change and the transition offers. There are high growth, as you know, high growth opportunities in energy, with renewables, with hydrogen, but in transport, but also in food, and in all sectors, there are emerging, revenues opportunities that can be captured. You can save cash and carbon. I think that what we heard was that, on the first lever, which is energy efficiency, it's operational excellence, basically. So you save CO2, but you save cash, and therefore you really need to accelerate on this one because it's a no-brainer. You can also save cash moving to renewables, sometimes building additional renewables from your own factories and selling the electricity. And therefore, with this additional cash flow, you can even finance electrification of your manufacturing and some other levers that are more costly. But at least in this first level, I'm not saying all levers are not expensive, and we'll come back to that the next wave will be much more costly, but at least you can save money. And then there's lower regulation risk because, as we know, the carbon tax is going to be deployed in a number of geographies. And you have also, as a first mover, the ability, I would have said the duty of influencing policies and regulation so that it helps you accelerate and not slow down. I'm coming from Europe, and although there are very good intentions with the Fit to 55 to get the right regulation in place, when you discuss with companies on the actual application of these very good ideas, you see that the bureaucracy and all type of theoretical, approaches can be also a barrier. So helping governments to get to the right regulation also, I think, is important and can create an advantage. Cheaper financing, more and more, and I'm sure you see it in India already, where you get a better financing when you're green and you've got good ratings on ESG. And all that combined helps to generate a higher value. Maybe the next slide of, why we think it's very important. This slide is not easy to read, forgive me, but what we did was to take the forecast of the new technology in time. So how is solar photovoltaic going to evolve? That was the 2002 forecast or the 2010 forecast. If you look at the picture on the higher part of the chart left. And you see that if you look today versus what was planned or forecasted 20 years or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it's multiplied by 36. We were completely wrong on the speed at which these new technologies were going to develop. completely wrong on the penetration, completely wrong, and that's the bottom part of the slide, on the cost it's reaching. Of course, the two are connected. And we were wrong on wind power, we were wrong on batteries. So we underestimate technology progress. And today we're faced with the same question. CCUS, is it economical? H2, green H2, is it economical? And when you look at that, you see what we think is that hopefully those technology will be in the money much sooner than what people expect. And that's important to recognize because it has consequences on how you're going to move forward. Now, time is running, so maybe I will pass that. There's another important element that I wanted to, so next slide. So the next slide very rapidly shows, shows all the levers. And what I was saying is that, you know, the energy savings and the moving to renewables don't cost that much and helps. In fact, it reduces the cost and helps to finance the levers that are a bit more costly. And the red ones, which are, hydrogen, CCUS, storage, that have a much higher cost, will need to be dealt with. And as I said, the sooner you invest in them, the better chance you have to lower the cost. But I want to say, even if it costs a lot, you see that first movers have already addressed some of those levers. And the next slide, the reason being that, you know, at the end of the day, you can move to the next slide. Even if it, you know, increased by 70 or 80% the cost of decarbonized cement or decarbonized steel versus the carbonized version, when you sum up on the total value chain and you look at the consequence of that on the price of a car or the price of a house, it's a couple of percentage points. So it forces, the new economy will force better collaboration and better discussion with the whole value chain. This is where policy will help, price of carbon, but it's also how are you going to deal with suppliers and how are you going to deal with your customers. And therefore, this is a critical element to take into account, is that with a very limited price increase, you can finance part of the changes that need to be done. And the last slide, which is, you know, when we look at all the different actors and the front runners, what they've been doing, and as an introduction, maybe for the discussion that we're going to have, I think that there's a number of very important dimensions. First, raise the bar for your industry. I mean, extrapolating what is existing will not be enough. You need to change the rules of the game. You need to be the front runner. And that's what Tesla has been doing, but that's also what Ørsted, the offshore wind manufacturer, has been doing by fundamentally changing their portfolio. And reshaping your context, as I said, acting on the regulation and pushing it, and convincing customers on the green demand, and in fact, be a leader in industrial as a number of company has been trying to do. The disrupting of your business model is also something you need to think about. It's, you know, the story of IKEA getting into new business model, including recycling. There's a number of examples around that. Getting into the re-engineering of your supply chain and saving cash is also another important one. And pioneering a net zero product, having this value chain approach is a key element. And I will just stop here by saying that India has a huge opportunity in my view, because as all these corporates are moving towards a net zero journey, their supply chain is going to be a critical element and a source of competitive advantage. So if India is successful in being the manufacturing hub of the world, or let me put it this way, to become the successful manufacturing hub of the world, I think decarbonization and being able to supply decarbonized commodities to those companies will be a major advantage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michel. As always, you have been able to guide us, guide everyone that what we need to do or what India need to do. And I'm so happy that you have given recipe that what we need to do by 5 ways to change the game. And I think if we change the game that way, then it's a win-win situation for everyone. You also highlighted in a very specific way that how forecast about the future technologies have gone wrong. Of course, it's a positive part, but then yes, it has gone wrong. So same way, I think we can expect how the globe will also accept maybe green hydrogen, maybe renewable power, maybe carbon capture, utilization and storage, and few such technologies also. So we all have to be more hopeful that what may happen because it's an uncharted territory for many technologies. So thanks for all these wisdom which you have given to us. And now it's time for change maker to share what changes they have made, what changes they expect. And I'm so happy to invite my good friend, Mr. Mukandan first. Mr. Mukandan, who has been leading not only the Tata Chemicals, but has been leading various industry bodies also, various technologies also in his own way. And he has shown his leadership. He has shown how changes can be made. And today, I'll request Mr. Mukandan to share that one, what vision industry and particular company should make to toe the line of net zero carbon economy. And secondly, in your sector, what should be done more that so that we all can think of that ultimately India will be a big manufacturing hub for the whole globe. Mr. Mukandan, floor is yours. And I'll request everyone to take around 10 minutes to share whatever they feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahendra, for this introduction and also the broad ground which has been set by our fellow panelists. I just start to say by, this shift is really on us, and I think many of us who are sitting in the industry can't ignore it. The pressure point is coming not just from regulation in the capital markets, whether it be debt. It'll be very difficult to raise debt in the long run because there'll be one route. It'll impact even listed and unlisted companies. The second route is through the equity capital market. They'll reward people who move in this direction. But that's the external piece. But I think internally, as has been already highlighted, employees and customers will start to shift away. So I think this must be viewed as a key element of what I would call building an organization which the stakeholders trust. And that starts with having a sense of purpose and building a culture and value, which is what I think companies which survive in the long term need to do, which is to say that I reduce my say-do gap. What I say I will do. I have a sense of purpose, why which is fundamentally to build a better world and have a culture which is based on that value system. Having said that, when you come to Indian context, I think ambition has been set, but at the time we can sort of debate, whether we should go to net zero by 2050 or 2070. Government has put a marker of 2070. That is fine, but I think many companies within India, in my view, will not have time beyond 2050 because they are accessing international capital market. They're part of the international value chain, and many international value chains have already moved forward and committed that they will achieve net zero by 2050. So I think while government has said 2070, I think we need to look at it much more aggressively within industry. I think that's upon each one of us. And there are going to be easy to abate sectors and hard to abate sectors. And we can't have one single, approach to, and it has to be a sectoral approach. Second is plan and pathway. At the country level, we do have a plan and pathway. I'll come to the roadblocks a little bit later, but certainly at even company level, we need to have a plan and pathway. And I think at the company level, when we start thinking about it, our approach has been to set a target for 2030 and actually back it with projects and capital. because that's really near term. We hardly have 8 years left to execute and reach that, which means we have 6 years. At the end of the day, anything you put on the 6th will come out as an outcome in the 7th or 8th year. So that's broadly the time schedule which we have in terms of capital to be put to work. And if you were to go to 2050, that's another 20 years. And if you say that, listen, I need to put all that change and shift mechanism by 2045, we've got a 15, let's say, year window before which we need to deliver on this net zero process. So there's a plan and pathway which companies have, and I'll come to some of the directions. We have to work both on demand side as well as on the supply side. On the demand side, I think energy efficiency, all the other projects which have been highlighted, government has done a terrific program on LED and all those. Also from the consumer side, this whole star rating has really taken off in terms of pushing people towards the whole issue of more energy efficient usage. The cities, for example, have started to order electric buses, and I think those are the kind of things which we need in terms of green mobility. Policy has been announced in terms of PLI for solar. Policy has been announced in terms of green hydrogen. So the whole ingredients of the plan and pathway are in place. Then comes at the country level, at the company level, at industry level, we need to have a reporting mechanism. Government, Ministry of Corporate Affairs already has started this BRSR, which is part of the whole ecosystem. But I think all of us need to voluntarily go towards reporting. And here I want to say we need to be looking at material issues of the company. At the same time, we should also be very clearly reporting on the material issues of the company, that we want to be very transparent with our stakeholders. So disclosure is not equal to transparency. I'll just simply say that companies need to build trust with the stakeholder, and for that they need to, if you take these three parts, setting the ambition which government has already set, plan and pathway, the ingredients are there, and reporting, then the underlying foundation of this has got to be capability building, which we need to do. Big companies have it, but I think we have a lot of work to do with medium and MSME companies within India, and I think moving them along in terms of capability building is going to be very critical. The element of financing is very important. So we have to bring all our capital markets, equity, as well as debt markets to align with this. Right now, I think they are beginning to speak, but not fully aligned. And lastly, access to technology. I think, as you mentioned, a lot of these technologies are shifting very, very fast. In terms of removing roadblocks, fundamentally, I would say one big roadblock India has, if you take the big picture view, we have to fix our broken distribution system, especially the state electricity boards. A lot of the energy transition will not happen. All the ambition India has set will not happen if we don't strike at the root cause of some of the difficulties industry will face if we don't fix that SEB. And if it's not fixed now, later on the distribution mechanism will come to sort of hold us from making further progress. Secondly, we need a broad framework of what is our energy policy in terms of the sources of energy. I think we have to recognize natural gas is going to be a bridge fuel. What is our policy towards biomass? Because we've got a very good policy, which is with respect to solar and wind, but other policies are missing. Lastly, I would say in our arsenal, we cannot ignore nuclear power, because I think the new technologies in terms of SMR, which have come on the road, we need to address the liability issue at a policy level. So that's on the source side, which big moves have been made by government. Then on the demand side, I think we have a lot of work to do within companies in terms of using energy efficiency as one key tool, working to make sure that we can tick all the boxes in terms of the low-hanging fruits before going into higher, more expensive things like energy storage, whether it be lithium or sodium batteries or green hydrogen. So all in all, I think a lot of opportunities here. So we need to move on all these fronts, and we have very limited time. As far as our company is concerned, we have clearly decided, if you sort of look at this whole piece, one third. The first 1/3 of the energy saving is sort of decarbonization is going to come clearly from savings. The second third is going to come from 1/3 is going to come from solar and wind, the hybrid, as well as use of biomass. And the third is going to come from things like carbon capture and switch to green hydrogen, which is still a bit of a distant away. In terms of carbon capture, for example, we've already executed a unit in the UK where we are actually capturing about 40,000 tons of carbon and converting it to useful product. And it's been a big success, but we need to scale that up and sort of deploy it much more efficiently in all our places. The first two buckets, which I mentioned, energy saving and shifting to more demand side management. That work is afoot in all our units. The second piece is around the switch to solar wind hybrid. Again, work is afoot. The bigger challenge for us, let me just say, is not within our fence, which is you would say the first phase of the operation, actually going beyond our fence and working with our supply chain. That work is yet to begin. It's something which we think we need to start because that's when the influence becomes bigger. So all in all, I would say a journey which all of us have to go together. Huge opportunities because the P multiples we've seen, at least in companies which have gotten listed recently, the valuation multiples, I think that those are really getting very, very attractive for companies which choose this path over not moving on this path. So I think all the right ingredients in place, but many pieces have to come together. Mahendra, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mukandan, and my compliments to you for already experimenting carbon capture and then utilizing it. And I think that will be a good demonstration project for all the industries. You have very well highlighted what needs to be done by the companies also, but you also very well highlighted one third, and definitely one third would be very, very difficult because that would be the challenge, how to use green technology, and maybe for that green finance may be required. So maybe if time permits, we'll come to that part. But now it's a great pleasure for me to invite Mr. Ashwath Ram. Mr. Ashwath Ram, he has a great expertise on working on technologies and more particularly on engines and related technologies. And he has good passion on how to improve air qualities. So whether it's in a company or in the society. So I'll request Mr. Ashwath Ram to share his thoughts on the same line or it may add anything else also. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with this panel and talk about environmental crisis and climate change, as all of us have very clearly now understood, is the existential crisis of our time. And it's something which we owe to our next generations to ensure that, they inherit a place which is better than what we inherited. Innovation, I believe, is at the core of our company's sustainable strategy, which we call Planet 2050. And this strategy is guided by a belief in our mission, which is to make people's lives better by powering a more prosperous world. And we know that we cannot do this if the overall planet is not healthier. So our aspirational targets are focused on three priority areas. First is that the communities where we are better because we are there. And one way to bring this to life is by the initiatives that we have taken to address global water crisis through a project we call Cummins Waterworks, where we have partnered with the NGO Waterworks and trying to improve the water conditions in different parts of the world. We're also doing our part to address air emissions and climate change in line with science, and especially that of ensuring that our customers' success is powered by carbon neutral technologies that addresses air quality. And so our focus is to get to destination zero by 2050. And the third aspect of it is to use natural resources in the most sustainable way, and that we are leading in protecting our planet's resources. We have set up some very, very specific goals by 2030 itself for greenhouse gases, which means we are committing on paper to say that we will reduce absolute greenhouse gas emissions from our facility and operations by 50% by 2030. We will reduce scope 3 absolute lifetime greenhouse gas emissions for newly sold products by another 25% from where we are today. And we are also committed to partner with customers to reduce scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions from products in the field by about 55 million metric tons. As far as our destination zero commitments are concerned, we have a very credible path to zero emissions. We are focusing on a three-way cycle. That is what we can do today. That means focusing existing emissions today, not just waiting for some fancy future, but doing what we can today. And ours is a comprehensive approach which encapsulates well-to-wheel emission reductions by matching technology readiness with infrastructure readiness. So we aim to drive wide-scale adoption due to affordability by using the right technology in the right countries at the right time. And I think this is going to help us achieve our 2050 zero emission target. Simply put, I think we are trying to get emissions to happen with the least cost on society. And as we saw in the presentation earlier, that it's likely that if we can move faster, it's not a cost. Actually, it's a benefit to society at a faster. We certainly believe that the price on carbon incentives incentivizes investment in all the areas and addresses the cost delta between current and new technologies through a market-based kind of approach. And I think if we can get alignment, especially within India, I think we should be able to move at a faster rate. And already we are seeing in other parts of the world that adaptability and adoptability are increasing so that people can, use technologies at a much faster rate. It's essential that one does look at it from a well-to-wheel approach because just saying I'm going to be I'm using green hydrogen or I'm using hydrogen or battery electric vehicle without looking at the source of the energy and burning more coal to support battery electric or hydrogen is not necessarily the essential way to decarbonize the total chain. So it's really important to look at every piece of the chain and then make sure that we are getting improvements in each of those. And the well-to-wheel approach requires that we look at considering all the energy users and emissions from all the primary energy sources through consumption during the vehicle operation, and it removes coal, oil or natural gas or the use of raw materials from the earth for refining, etc. When you're using fuel or batteries, etc. So it looks at the entire approach, and unless you look at the overall picture, you end up not getting an optimum kind of solution. And since there is no place in the world where the grid is 100% clean yet, the right solution for addressing our air quality and climate change crisis is more nuanced than just making all vehicles electric, etc. So just to decarbonize transportation and the industries that we serve, we must work to decarbonize the total chain of emissions and address all unintended releases of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. For example, methane leakage in natural gas distribution and all of those kinds of things. Very excited about all the things the government of India is doing, and as one of the companies who have a lot of investment in hydrogen technology, quite excited to see all the work being done. And we have found over the 60 years that we have been in India that we have never been successful without locally manufacturing and producing a lot of the products. So quite excited to make some of those investments and carry things forward. So it's an exciting time, both for business and from an environment perspective. And I'm quite optimistic that we'll be able to drive significant change as well as investments in manufacturing in India to do the same in the next few years.
Thanks, Mr. Ashwath, and thanks for showing optimism, and secondly, taking so many initiatives. And I think one of the important things which you already have taken up is how to address scope 3 emissions. And once we are able to address that, then you are able to rope in SMEs, which are the most important part of overall India's manufacturing hub. So I think that will play a very, very important role. otherwise like how to use green hydrogen with the, and when it's the green hydrogen, it means renewable energy is being used to produce hydrogen. So I think the way government is taking steps, faster steps of hydrogen mission, and then giving some money for these missions, etc., that will go a long way. And I'm sure under your leadership, this sector will grow in a big way. Now, I have the pleasure of inviting one of the important member of the leading industrial group, Kirloskar Group. So I invite Madam Gauri Kirloskar, who has a very interest in infrastructure investment and playing very important role on in Kirloskar Group. So she can definitely talk of how stakeholders do think about the green economy, green initiatives, and what Kirloskar Group is doing and what others should do. Madam Gauri.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singhi, for the very kind introduction. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this subject and also power intensive, coal intensive, and how we move to carbon neutral and net zero is a constant topic. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of the specific examples of the things that we are doing. When we are talking about moving towards the goals that were discussed earlier, I think it has to be a joint effort. When I say it has to be a joint effort, broadly three main parts. The first one is the global economy and the support of all of the countries participating. As was a key discussion point at COP26, the rules of the game will be very different for developed, emerging, and underdeveloped economies. The priorities of these countries will be different, and hence the agreement and understanding at the intergovernment levels on how one supports the other becomes very important. I think there was a gap on the climate financing goals, so I think that, for example, is very, very important for us to get to these goals. Otherwise, it becomes a case of one gaining more at the cost of the other, which automatically dwindles the whole effort. The second is within the economy, the regulatory and the incentivization policy frameworks, the push for relevant infrastructure development so as to make the transition sustainable from a business model standpoint. The third is the industry and its efforts in supporting the above two by putting in the right resources and focus. I do believe that the industry adoption will be an automatic result of the first two, as it will give the industry the confidence to invest. In our case, we have a collaboration with the Center for Industry 4.0, which is a Government of India initiative. And this has helped us develop technologies that are of immense use in our manufacturing locations. It's a co-learning model where we learn from C4I4 on digitization and Industry 4.0, and they learn from us on practical implementation in a manufacturing ecosystem. This learning then gets transferred to the industry as a whole as consulting engagements or products and services. So for example, if some economies transition and incur the high cost of transition and the others don't, in a global connected economy, it will be a win-lose game rather than a win-win. Or if industries do not invest in R&D to get the right technology that can replace the existing one, the cost of transition becomes untenable. So in my view, all these three levers will have to work in tandem. A classic example of this is when C4I4 plays the role of the SME when it comes to digitization, big data, and Industry 4.0, and we play the part that then provides the industry ecosystem. I think this is a great opportunity for economies like India to become the hub for some of these new technologies that we're talking about. It's an open level playing field for everyone now, and whoever can bring the right technology at the right cost will rule the market. What is great for India is that there's enough internal demand because of our large domestic economy. But it also means that the solutions have to be fit for market. Unlike Cummins, we are largely a domestic player, which is why I'm saying that the business model has to be right for us to be able to invest in these technologies. So on one end, there's the potential of a new business segment altogether, and on the other end, there's a huge potential in existing businesses to focus on their current models to make it more sustainable. At the end of the day, I strongly believe in the business case of sustainability. To speak of technology in particular and the role of green, technology and technology-enabled business processes like Industry 4.0 help in producing with the least waste at the lowest cost possible, with the most optimized resources in the levels of the quality that the customer wants. And as the industry transitions into more sustainable practices like green manufacturing, green supply chain, etc., technology will play a huge role, I believe. For example, and this is a very simple example, simple automations like logistics management or AI-driven route optimizations has given us huge cost savings at Kirloskar Oil Engines in particular, and of course, significantly reduces environmental impact as lesser resources are used, and it gives significant savings as well. I feel the whole manufacturing space is at an inflection point. Waves and waves of changes are happening in our space, not only in terms of technology, but in terms of supply chain resilience, etc. In terms of technology, products, something is changing every day. So I think there are two main areas where India can focus. One is to see how we can become a dominant player in R&D in space of sustainable manufacturing. To use these skills to develop technologies and practices that make manufacturing sustainable. It's not just a sustainability effort, but I think this is a big business opportunity as well. The second, as I mentioned before, is around technology and using technology as a lever for sustainability. Using technology and data to optimize our manufacturing, supply chain, and other manufacturing related processes to reduce waste is a huge opportunity for us. Industries must not look at this with a short-term lens. Investment in technology and analytics will cost you in the beginning, but in the long term, it is a huge payback as the incremental costs are almost nil. So a good example for this in our group is the investments that we have made in creating a world-class manufacturing facility at Kagal for Kirloskar Oil Engines. This facility is carbon neutral. It is water efficient, moving quickly to water neutral as well, and a certified Green Co Platinum facility. This facility has won a lot of accolades such as carbon neutrality accreditation, excellent energy efficient plant by CII actually, and noteworthy water efficient unit at CII as well. Around 50% of the electricity consumption comes from our installed solar plant of 5.5 megawatts. As I said earlier, we made the initial investments, we planned it for scale, and we now have the advantage of scaling at very less incremental cost. Each industry is different, and hence the opportunities and roadmap will be different for each industry. For examples, in the sectors that we operate, we focus on our manufacturing operations and facilities to make it carbon neutral. Of the products that we make, especially in diesel, the endeavor is to keep investing in technologies that are good alternatives in their nascent stage and be ready for transition when the time is right. The transition will eventually happen when the business model is an attractive alternative for diesel. This will take a little bit more time in the power ranges that we operate. Until then, the idea is to make the cleanest engines possible as mobility and power requirements are to be met for the economy to grow. We have a clear path and milestones to move into stricter emission compliant engines and onwards to zero emission. In some of the industries that we operate, like Kirloskar Ferris, which is a foundry business and which uses coal as fuel, we are looking at what better alternatives can be. Again, the technology has to evolve for an alternative technology that serves the need of that industry. At Kirloskar Ferris as well, which is very, very power intensive, we have put up an 11 megawatt power plant, and we also recover the heat from our coke oven facility to use for power. At Kirloskar Oil Engines, we also have a plant that converts plastic into diesel. And so we collect plastic, around 100 kilos of plastic per day from around Kolhapur, and we convert it into diesel, which is used in our testing facilities, as well as the forklifts that operate around the plant. So those are some examples. And in summary, I think it's about meeting of the minds and working together with academia, industry, and the government. And this will be key to getting the business model right and making things viable to move in the right direction. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thanks, Gauri. You have very well highlighted, two important areas where we all should work along with the government. One is how we can create R&D facilities for sustainable manufacturing. And second, how green technologies can be used for sustainability. And I think like what Mr. Michel has highlighted, you also highlighted, sustainability is a good business. And in fact, in our organization, Dalmia Cement, we do say clean and green is profitable and sustainable. And I think this is the way we all have to have those specific strategies. And now I think it's a great opportunity for me to invite the young leader, young entrepreneur, young change maker, Mr. Nishant Arya. Mr. Nishant Arya, he has interest in varied fields as well. He's a chairman of Linde Women GmbH Germany and has interest in electric vehicles, renewable energy, environment management. So Nishant, just share us what you are doing, what we should do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singhi, for your kind words. I think it's a pleasure to be here and really sharing our perspective. I think a lot of very good points have been made by other co-panelists and what they're doing and what do they intend to do in the coming years. And clearly that is what we see as well, because our belief is that sustainability drives scalability, and how that scalability can lead to competitiveness is what is going to change the whole landscape. And while we are doing that, I think there are certain key technologies which can enable us to do so in terms of the big data or the IoT industry 4.0. I think it's very relevant in today's scenario to really understand that how we are ensuring the efficiency and effectiveness in whatever we do. And at the same time, we go and deploy such kind of technologies as they are not something which is going to enhance us the competitiveness, but putting India on the global manufacturing map is very, very important. And whilst we are doing that, if we are using the green technologies, I think everyone spoke how they're using solar, wind, and other things. So we as a company feel that it's also important to see the circular economy perspective, which is very, very important. And that is something which we have instilled into our businesses, not only the manufacturing facilities worldwide. So today, when we look at the electric vehicle market in India, I think Mukundan also spoke about it, how India is looking at electric vehicles, and the government is really supporting on the demand side when we have the FAME 2 policy, which is acting as a catalyst, and we are getting those benefits. And on the manufacturing side, with the PLI on the battery as well as on the electric vehicles, where companies are going for manufacturing locally. I think what is essential is that how, when we are manufacturing, designing, so it starts from the basic, it's a grounds up approach, that when you're designing, manufacturing such kind of battery packs, so how you are ensuring the second life and the third life, how that is being a key parameter which is being kept in mind when you're having different kind of resources, because there are dearth of these resources, and how we are able to utilize them in the best possible manner, keeping the environment in mind, and seeing that in certain areas our country is self-sufficient, self-reliant, but on certain key minerals we have to depend upon other countries. So whilst we do that, so in such kind of cases, today we see majority people talking about how electric vehicles are using these lithium batteries and other new technologies and new chemistries, and how in the future these battery packs could be used for energy storage applications, which is also supporting in grid balancing, which is supporting in really taking a holistic view when the battery packs are having that kind of a life cycle and the design element in them, which is a very key element of and key part of sustainability as we go along, and really impacts the environment, and how we are able to use the whole ecosystem when we talk about the circular economy. And in a third life, then we end up going and using those battery packs as a power backup as well. So today 15 to 20 years is a lifespan of a battery which we can look at if we do such kind of things, and the right depth of discharge and state of charge is incorporated in the design stage itself for the battery to be protected for 20 years. On the other hand, when we look at the whole environment, we see that solar and wind and hydro and few other areas have picked up. As a country, we generate about 62 million tons of waste today every year. What do we do with that waste? How is that waste used to generate energy, or that waste is used for creating different products which the industry can use? I think that is something which we all need to embark upon to really understand that how it can benefit, and it is self-sustainable and profitable for companies to do this. So it is not a bad idea to see that if the self-sustainable and profitable structures are created around sustainability and areas which are posing challenges to our country as we proceed further with such kind of and such volumes of waste being generated. So there are many global technologies which we can adopt as a country, and we are seeing that there has been some focus, but we have a long way to go. and that also enhances and ensures our energy security as a country, in addition to the circular economy, which is leading to sustainability. When we take this forward, we also clearly understand that how different manufacturing footprints, when they are created, that we have multiple allied services, multiple allied elements to the whole thing, which where the industries need different kind of support systems. So in this condition, what becomes instrumental is that how we have a technology roadmap, how industry, academia, and the different industry stakeholders can really partner together and work together, because each industry doing such kind of activities in silos would take years and would have a different scale and size vis-a-vis the whole industry working together. So I think such industry level goals, if we can create industry level goals, as whether it's net zero 2050, certain gas and greenhouse gases emissions to be cut down by 2030, 2040, I think that would really make it more meaningful, and we would have a quantifiable target which each industry can adopt, and as the industry things can be driven forward. On the other side, today there is a lot of interest of the global funds to come into such areas, which talk about the green impact, which talk about the green gases getting which are being emitted, how are they being reduced or optimized or stopped completely. I think creating a platform where such funds are able to really see light of the day and understand the different opportunities and understand the nuances at the ground level and how things can scale up would really be a kind of a hockey stick kind of an opportunity, not only for the industry but such kind of such funds to come on board, where they work with the industry and have a common objective as they are going forward. So on one hand we are resolving a problem, and on the other hand we are creating opportunity here, and clearly understanding and seeing that how this will also support in creating job opportunities. And on the other hand, many people are also working, and we as an organization ourselves commit to this, that how we are seeing that we are learning, unlearning, relearning a lot of skills. A lot of skills will get redundant and a lot of new skills will be required. And I think that is one of the primary targets for us as a nation. And then in that inclusive growth, we are able to involve multiple other people in that journey. While we are doing this, this ends up creating a whole ecosystem where, whether we talk about manufacturing, we talk about allied services, we talk about the energy mix, we talk about skill, and we talk about technology. And in terms of technology, there are challenges which we see today in terms of companies investing in technology only for themselves. So if we are able to see that there are certain common technologies, how can the industries work together on those common technologies and really understand, like in electric vehicles, what we have seen in the last few years, the total market has transformed and changed over from what it was earlier. People earlier used to talk about only just the batteries and other things. Now, in the last few years, it has changed over, that the role of power electronics and semiconductors have become very important. And last couple of years, we have all come to understand that how India today doesn't have any local fabric of semiconductor manufacturing, which is imperative for the future, and not only for electric vehicles, for multiple other power electronics and electronic segments, which use, and the usage and consumption of semiconductors increasing day by day, which would also fuel the digital India, which will also fuel the smart India, smart city approach, and many other applications for that matter. So it is really critical that, and such facilities have a very high investment and a very large feasibility. So I think if we can clearly create a footprint of such kind of opportunities where companies can collaborate and work together, and such facilities are also fuel guzzlers. And today in India, when such facilities are set up, if we as a country and we as an industry really look at this, and CII takes lead in such kind of actions, where these are all platinum rated buildings, we are all having LEED certification. So people at earlier in few earlier years, last 4 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, 20 years, you should see that this is something which differentiates us, which is a USP. I think this is a need of the hour. It's not a choice which we are making today, for ensuring that India is at the forefront of this evolution and change. And we need to be the change we want to see eventually as we go forward. So I think that's a pledge each one of us has to take, and that is what we as an organization do. That is why, as you mentioned, whether in electric vehicles or in energy storage, or in battery manufacturing, or into renewable energy, or into environment management, in addition to the other auto systems business, we look at it in a very inclusive manner. And the idea has been that how sustainability, as I said initially, can drive scalability, leading to competitiveness, and not only in India, because we have presence across the world. So across the world in different geographies, you are able to put this across, and seeing that how India is becoming a global manufacturing hub. And for that to happen, a clear perspective, even including the green impact funds and such kind of organizations who are looking to really see how they can fuel this kind of growth, is also going to be inevitable and very important for us to proceed further. Thank you.
Thanks, Nishant. And you have very well highlighted one, overall circular economy, how it makes the impact. And then you also talked about in totality how ecosystems should work and how everything is correlated. And we have also seen in India now the way things are changing, the perspectives are changing. And if we talk of renewable energy or particularly electric vehicle, I think it's a great change which India is witnessing. And I think slowly we'll have all elements by which India can be a manufacturing hub. And of course, for all of us, it will be very important to unlearn and relearn. We'll have to unlearn the past extents, and whatever relearn can be done for sustainability, I think that will go a long way. So thanks for your inputs. And now it's a time to invite Mr. Apur Gupta, who is working as a transformation person. Basically, Hero Group is also in many ways have transformed the thoughts, the technologies, and Mr. Purgupta has worked in a big way on this. So let us have his thoughts. Mr. Purgupta, please.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. A warm welcome to all the panelists and the audience as well. So as you know, Hero MotoCorp is a leader in the automotive industry. We are the world's largest manufacturer of motorcycles and scooters, and we've held that position proudly for the last 20 years. We are also very proud of having sold our 100th millionth vehicle last year. So we've already surpassed that significant milestone. And in our view, mobility is a fundamental human need. It's an essential enabler to prosperity, especially in the developing parts of the world where people rely on two-wheelers for their livelihood. There are three major causes related to mobility and environment and sustainability. One is, of course, pollution, which is emitted from the current mobility solutions which are there. The second one is accidents and deaths related to mobility. And the third one is congestions, which create heavy financial losses for governments and businesses everywhere. We are very proud to have declared that we want to be the future of mobility. And we see electric vehicles as a first step in that whole journey of being the future of mobility and being a kind of a transformation agent to do that while making our planet and our societies sustainable and more environment friendly. So what does that really mean? I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but it's important to remember that reducing carbon emissions is linked to clean air, and clean air is good for business. It is related to a much happier and a healthier workforce. It's related to lower costs for healthcare, and it has got many other benefits like preventing premature deaths and healthy children, and making sure that our entire workforce is really and their people who are dependent on that workforce is really taken care of and protected. Just as a kind of a reminder, these kind of issues related to pollution, especially health issues, they almost create loss of 3.3% in global GDP, which is almost $2.9 trillion. And governments around the world almost spend $8.3 trillion in healthcare costs. And the three top governments which do that is actually China, India, and Russia. So this is something very pertinent to us. As we all know, COP26, we know that to get to the 1.5 degree scenario, everybody has to come together, both the private sector as well as the governments, as well as the public sector, to really come and collaborate to make changes which can actually help us achieve net zero ambitions. So what is it that we are doing, at Hero MotoCorp? We are actually the first ones to have introduced the four-stroke engines, for those of you who remember, a few years ago, which actually increased the efficiency of our vehicles by more than 60%, which significantly reduced the amount of fossil fuels we burn and hence the pollution. We've been promoting models which have got I3S technology, which is idle start-stop system, which again makes our products very, very efficient and less polluting for the environment. In our manufacturing facilities, we've created green factories. We are using trigeneration, which is vapor absorption machines. We are using cradle-to-cradle designs. We've created bio walls. So we are doing a lot of things in our factories to make sure that we are carbon neutral, and we plan to achieve that milestone by 2030. Make sure we've got water positive facilities. So we already more than 350% water positive. We don't want to stop there. We want to go to 500% water positive. And we are wanting to achieve zero waste to landfill by 2025. In addition to that, we are also promoting gender diversity. So we are really focusing on how do we make our workplace very conducive and supportive of all kind of genders. And gender doesn't just mean male, female, but all kind of genders. How do we put the right policies in place? How do we attract the right talent across all genders to make diversity and inclusion a key part of our business strategy? We're also looking at achieving product recyclability. So already 95% of product is made of recyclable materials, but we don't want to stop there. We want to go even further, which means promoting circular supply chains, making sure we minimize the content of non-recyclable materials. And of course, like I said, EV is one step in that journey. More than that, we have to address our scope 3 emissions, which means we need to enroll our dealerships and our customers as part of this program to make them also net zero and then help the overall environment and sustainability and our own carbon footprint. And more importantly, our suppliers need to be part of this program as well. So those are things which we are really pushing. Like a lot of you have already said, we have an aspiration to become net zero as well. And that means we are really working with different institutions to promote innovation in technologies which can create solutions for being net zero. Some of those things are, looking at sustainable energy, renewable energy, looking at, how do we go to clean technologies, hydrogen, etc., etc. So those are things which a lot of the panelists have already spoken about. We are very proud to say that we are the only motorcycle and scooter company in the world in the DJSI Emerging Markets Index, and we've held that position in 2020 and 2021. We are also globally, the #1 motorcycle and scooter company in sustainable analytics. And closer to home, we are very proud to say that in the CII Green Co rating system, we are the only R&D facility across all industries in India to have achieved platinum rating. So, we take sustainability extremely seriously, and it's at the heart of everything we do, right? From our product designs to our manufacturing facilities, to our employees, to all our policies, and to our governance as well. So then coming to manufacturing industry 4.0, it's something which the government is driving. It's something which we want to drive as an industry as well. So what does this mean? One is, of course, we need to invest capital to become sustainable. And a lot of this capital today and a lot of these technologies which we need to invest in will not necessarily have attractive paybacks from day one. So we need to make sure that we invest capital smartly, and sustainability and environmental protection doesn't really mean a lot of capital to be invested. It really means being very choiceful and being very thoughtful about where we need to invest in capital, and then looking at policies which can favor or which can facilitate capital which is being invested behind ESG. Like, for example, access to capital at lower interest rates. Even a 1% interest rate which is lower can actually create a significant momentum in the capital which can be invested behind these technologies. As we go into automation, as we leverage digital, as we go for Industry 4.0, we, as part of our the S part of the ESG, we have to also take care of our human capital. And some of our panelists talked about this before. It requires policies and support from the government as well to make sure we provide the right training ecosystems. We look at the right course curriculums within our university schools, and the ITI kind of environments which prepare the future workforce for Industry 4.0 kind of skills. We incentivize companies to provide training. We incentivize companies to upgrade the human capital and make sure nobody is getting left behind. As we move into manufacturing 4.0, we also have to be conscious about the fact that a lot of it is based on data. And when a lot of the processes and manufacturing and the whole ecosystem is starting to get based on data, we also then get into the risk of cybersecurity. And there have been a lot of cases where industries have been brought to their knees, or operations have stopped because of data breaches. And even a half an hour loss of production in a high throughput industry like automotive, for example, means significant loss of value and significant loss of production. So at the heart of it, we also need to make sure that we've got the right data protection laws, we've got the right agencies and policies in the government which can take care of cybersecurity for the whole industry. And this is especially relevant for SMEs and medium scale industries, because we, the larger manufacturers, depend on them as well, and data security breaches at their end are also very, very impactful to us. To drive sustainability, we also have to drive consumer awareness. We have to drive consumer education. We have to drive consumer participation. The consumers at the heart of any circular economy are the starting points. They're the ones who need to segregate waste in the proper way. They have to facilitate waste collection so that it can be recycled properly. And they have to be ready to buy recycled products. And at the start, be even ready to pay slight premiums where required. We need to use technology very smartly to reduce waste, but also to produce higher quality materials and higher quality products which can reduce the usage of the product itself or the material itself. So for example, electric vehicles consume lesser steel than internal combustion engines. And that's a very smart way of getting to a higher quality, a better product, which reduces the consumption of steel, which then has a huge environment footprint as well. At the end of the day, what's very important is the policy frameworks and what support government and the industry as a whole can give to us. FAME 2, PLI, Made in India are outstanding initiatives, and they are really the right steps for us to become more self-reliant and be world-class in manufacturing. We really have to promote SMEs, and that helps in getting self-reliance in electronics and component manufacturing, something which is very, very important, as we've seen all the supply chain disruptions and the component shortages, which have particularly impacted the automotive industry. We need a unification of policies. So, in states, municipalities, central government, we have different policies, which makes it a bit difficult for players like Hero, who are playing on the national and global field to, have uniform products and initiatives across our whole value system. So, for example, plastic recycling rules. States have different EPRs. If you look at EV policies, there are different policies by states on for promotion and incentives to EVs. If you look at other things like how renewable energy is fed into the grid, what can we do around rewheeling? If we have uniform policies, that really facilitates acceleration of these initiatives by the corporates and fast adoption of these initiatives.
Mr. Apurva, I think we'll have to now end here. So sorry to interrupt you, but I must say you have given a sustainable structure for any organization, and compliments to you for various initiatives taken and Hero Group. And I'm sure these steps, these actions will go a long way in one involving SMEs, because here also SMEs will play a very important role, not only for technology but also for scope 3 emissions. Though we have already exceeded time, but if there are few minutes left, Mr. Satish or Mr.
Mr. Singh, Satish, maybe I think even though we have overshot the time, I think it will be good to hear some closing comments from at least, if not all the speakers, maybe from Michelle or Mr. Mukundan or Ashwath. In fact, I wanted to also acknowledge and thank Mr. Ashwath. He's traveling abroad, but still he has taken time to be with us at this panel. So maybe we can do it in that way before we close and move for the next session starting at 2:30 in the same link. Thank you.
So maybe then I can request Mr. Michel, because he has heard what Indian leaders are doing, what change makers are doing, and you have all perspective of India and globe. So maybe in 5 minutes time, you can share your thoughts.
Yeah. So thank you very much. First and foremost, I've been very impressed, sincerely very impressed by what I've heard so far. And it's, I must say, as a planet citizen, very reassuring that India is on the move, and is on the move faster than what you can see and what you can hear. I also heard one of you say, India net zero is 2070, but us corporate, we don't have time.
Yes.
So we'll go much faster because it's a question of survival, of course, contribution to the planet, but competitiveness versus the others. So I was very impressed. I am very impressed. I think I heard that all the main levers that you are putting in place in a very proactive way, whether it's circular economy, energy efficiency, of course, but also starting with AI, artificial intelligence, waste, value chain approaches, scope 3. I think all these elements that you are deploying and developing are quite efficient and are the right things to do. Now, what's next? I think the key element now is scaling. It's, pilots trying is great. Scaling is the most difficult and important challenge. And when I'm saying scaling, it's not 10% of your business. It has to be over 100% of the business. And this movement will require investments and require capabilities and requires favorable regulation at the same time. And the thing is, today, when I look at the barriers to do that, what I hear around scaling is one on data, which is it's difficult to have the data, and therefore when I want to scale decarbonization in my supply chain with my suppliers, I don't have the data, and therefore it takes time to really understand what I can do. I hear business case. Okay, I can do one or two pilot. Investors don't really see it on my P&L overall because it's just a couple of percentage points of my business. But if I'm going to scale it, then I need to have backup from the investors because it's not going to be profitable right away. And I need the financing that goes with it. So this business case, it can be a barrier. And the response to that, I think, is several. There's one which is policies. When you said you don't have time as corporates, you don't have time as corporates, and therefore the country needs to help. If the country wants to have the industry of the future, they need to help those business cases by financing and de-risking, but also by putting in place the right policies, carbon price, etc., to make those investments competitive. And you are all global players now, and you're serving the whole world. So I'm telling you, in Europe, and hopefully at one point in the US as well, but in Europe, we have major problem with the scope 3. And you are the scope 3 of the world, and you are the scope 3 of Europe, potentially. You're doing much more than that. But what I'm saying is there is emerging a market right now in Europe where there's already scarcity in terms of decarbonized products and supply that is being needed, whether it's steel, whether it's cement, whether it's in the different commodities. So the business case, I think, is a key element. But I think for those who make it work faster than the others, the scaling before the others will make you competitive. And therefore, the business case is maybe tricky in the short term, but in the medium term, it's a must-do. And the last point I wanted to make is that, as you said, and many of you said, I think thinking about R&D, technology, and being always one step further is a critical element, because we are on a journey where still on the technology side and even on the science side, there's a lot of things we don't know. And therefore, it's not only to deploy what is already existing and make it work, but it's also preparing for the next stage and the next stage to remain competitive in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Michel. And I think all of us have to now think that to attract global customers and the global procurement, what India and Indian manufacturing companies need to do. And in my view, I think one, if our products are low carbon products and ultimately net zero carbon products, then definitely global companies would procure material from us. Second, how it can be cost competitive. So on that, until unless we use green technologies, that may not be cost competitive. But for that, we may need green finance, climate finance to experiment it. And third would be how there can be simplification of policies, how there can be ease of doing business. So these are the three major imperatives that will be required to make India major major manufacturing hub with all sustainability activities. So I would just like to have the benefit now of just 2 minutes comments from each one of you. So Mr. Mukundan, first you can share your thought for 2 minutes, that one or two actions which we can recommend even to the government also, or to the UN COP also.
Thank you, Mahendra. I think very enriching session. I must say that I've made elaborate notes, but I just want to use one word for what everybody, messages I took away from all. The message I took away from everyone was technology is the key. While we had a big backdrop which came from Michel, I think technology and innovation is the key. From Ashwath, I took the message, think end to end. I think he was saying just don't talk about your piece, think end to end. Gauri was speaking a lot about collaboration and coming together as multiple people coming together for solution. And Nishant was saying take a longer view, take a 15-20-year view, think circularity, think multiple lives of the same product. And I think what I heard from Apurva was be boundaryless. I mean, you can be in your own business, but I think you need to go beyond where you are. I just want to leave with one reflection on this session is, as I heard everyone, I think what I was reflecting is like a marathon runner. You need to pace yourself. This is not a sprint. This is not a T20 where you can sort of scale up during, start hitting. It's like a test match. You need to pace yourself. And also have a reflection that one should not get immobilized by the short-term targets, because short-term is not so near, but also we should keep moving because long-term is not too far away. That's broadly my reflectional session, but really enjoyed the perspectives I got from everyone.
Thanks. Mr. Ashwath, please. 2 minutes.
Thank you for summarizing so well, Mr. Mukundan and Mr. Singhi as well. I'd like to conclude by with just 3 points and just to elaborate what I feel pretty strongly about. First is that action is required today. We must move now to the part 2.0. We cannot just sit still and say, I'll wait for things to happen, etc. Progress requires partnership. I mean, no one company, one country, one bunch of people has everything that is required to make progress on this path. So we have to work together for a greater good. Third is, I'll reinforce, technology is absolutely critical, especially from an India perspective. We have already fallen behind in the battery race. We will fall behind in the hydrogen race as well in comparison to Europe and China, for example. So it's really, really important, both from our energy perspective as well as in the overall scope of things that we invest in the technology right now and not wait for the long-term future.
Thanks, Ashwat. Thanks, Ashwat. Mr. Nishant.
Yeah, and I think everything has been very well said. Each and every point is that how sustainability can drive scalability and how technology can drive value, and that value which all of us can harness and really utilize for ensuring the growth of the organizations. And another important element which is here is that how each and every aspect is contributing towards us as a nation. One thing I would just like to add to this, which I personally learned, and I think we could learn from Israel as a nation, is in certain areas on technologies, we will not succeed in every case, but how we fail fast and fail cheap if we have to, and we really adopt the best in class and create that, and may not just cut copy paste from everywhere. So I think, in addition to what has already been said, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishant. Mr. Apurva.
So I will just use two quotations, and these are not mine, but I really like them. So one is, together at industry, make sustainability profitable, and through that, make your profit sustainable. That's really at the heart of it. And remember, at the end of the day, we have to turn Earth back to Earth again. What we inherited from our forefathers is what we need to leave for our generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Apurva. And I would also like to use one quote which is just on the back of my side, which is of Swami Vivekananda, that all power is within you. You can do anything and everything. And good part is that as a leader, as a change maker, you have been doing it, and very well appreciated by Mr. Michel. And it has been a great benefit to me also personally. A lot of things I have learned which will be used. And of course, whatever deliberations we had today, I think that will be very useful for all the organizations of the country as well for the government of India. So maybe I would request Mr. Satish that we can create certain recommendations which can be shared with all CII members as well as with the government and the state governments, so that we all work towards a sustainable future. And I'm so happy that I could get an opportunity to talk to all of you and get your views. And thanks for your support. And I'm sorry that this session has been delayed by more than 21 minutes. So thanks everyone, and happy and sustainable future.
Thank you, Mr. Singhi. Thank you, all speakers.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your participation. For the next session, it will start at 2:15 using the same link. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Michel.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Michel. Thank you.
Power. Responsibility. Our future depends on the balance. We're Cummins, and our balance of power and responsibility is behind some of the world's largest green hydrogen production plants and the first ever emission-free hydrogen fuel cell passenger train. It's also putting kids on zero-emission school buses every morning. Whether we're powering data centers, helping to build greener homes, plowing fields, leaving a zero carbon footprint, or being the heartbeat of a hospital. We're investing $906 million a year to pioneer the most responsible, innovative, and sustainable power solutions we can. Because now, more than ever, we need to do the right thing. And we need to do it together. Cummins, always responsible. For a world that's always on.
Zinc, aluminium, copper, silver, iron ore, oil and gas are the building blocks of the modern world. Without them, life as we know it would be impossible. With a footprint spanning 4 continents, Vedanta is one of the largest producers of natural resources in the world. Copper is where it all began for Vedanta. Today, Vedanta is a leading global player in copper. With its multiple present-day uses, copper plays a critical role in contemporary life. Aluminium has been called a perfect material, touching our lives in the most fundamental ways. Vedanta is India's largest producer of this most versatile of metals, aluminium. Silver is a key element in digital connectivity. 95% of India's primary silver is produced by Vedanta. One of metal's unsung heroes is zinc. Zinc protects and extends the life of steel. Vedanta is one of the world's leading integrated producers of zinc and lead. Oil fuels the drive behind modern economies and lifestyles. Vedanta Can Oil and Gas is one of India's leading independent energy majors. As India's largest iron ore producer, Vedanta has set a precedent in environmental concern, transforming a used mine site into a beautiful horticultural park.
We at Vedanta are fully committed to explore and to develop these resources in most sustainable manner. This will be a game changer for the economy and will create millions of jobs and eradicate poverty. I'm committed to build a culture, not only the company, the culture built on trust, working together in harmony for the greater good. For me, business is not about accumulating wealth. It's all about giving back to the society.
power, responsibility. Our future depends on the balance. We're Cummins, and our balance of power and responsibility is behind some of the world's largest green hydrogen production plants and the first ever emission-free hydrogen fuel cell passenger train. It's also putting kids on zero-emission school buses every morning. Whether we're powering data centers, helping to build greener homes, plowing fields, leaving a zero carbon footprint, or being the heartbeat of a hospital. We're investing $906 million a year to pioneer the most responsible, innovative, and sustainable power solutions we can. Because now, more than ever, we need to do the right thing. And we need to do it together. Cummins, always responsible. For a world that's always on.
Zinc, aluminium, copper, silver, iron ore, oil and gas are the building blocks of the modern world. Without them, life as we know it would be impossible. With a footprint spanning 4 continents, Vedanta is one of the largest producers of natural resources in the world. Copper is where it all began for Vedanta. Today, Vedanta is a leading global player in copper. With its multiple present-day uses, copper plays a critical role in contemporary life. Aluminium has been called a perfect material, touching our lives in the most fundamental ways. Vedanta is India's largest producer of this most versatile of metals, aluminium. Silver is a key element in digital connectivity. 95% of India's primary silver is produced by Vedanta. One of metal's unsung heroes is zinc. Zinc protects and extends the life of steel. Vedanta is one of the world's leading integrated producers of zinc and lead. Oil fuels the drive behind modern economies and lifestyles. Vedanta Can Oil and Gas is one of India's leading independent energy majors. As India's largest iron ore producer, Vedanta has set a precedent in environmental concern, transforming a used mine site.
Are fully committed to explore and to develop these resources in most sustainable manner. This will be a game changer for the economy and will create millions of jobs and eradicate poverty. I'm committed to build a culture, not only the company, the culture built on trust, working together in harmony for the greater good. For me, business is not about accumulating wealth. It's all about giving back to the society.
power, responsibility. Our future depends on the balance. We're Cummins, and our balance of power and responsibility is behind some of the world's largest green hydrogen production plants and the first ever emission-free hydrogen fuel cell passenger train. It's also putting kids on zero-emission school buses every morning. Whether we're powering data centers, helping to build greener homes, plowing fields, leaving a zero carbon footprint, or being the heartbeat of a hospital. We're investing $906 million a year to pioneer the most responsible, innovative, and sustainable power solutions we can. Because now, more than ever, we need to do the right thing. And we need to do it together. Cummins, always responsible. For a world that's always on.
Zinc, aluminium, copper, silver, iron ore, oil and gas are the building blocks of the modern world. Without them, life as we know it would be impossible. With a footprint spanning 4 continents, Vedanta is one of the largest producers of natural resources in the world. Copper is where it all began for Vedanta. Today, Vedanta is a leading global player in copper. With its multiple present-day uses, copper plays a critical role in contemporary life. Aluminium has been called a perfect material, touching our lives in the most fundamental ways. Vedanta is India's largest producer of this most versatile of metals, aluminium. Silver is a key element in digital connectivity. 95% of India's primary silver is produced by Vedanta. One of metal's unsung heroes is zinc. Zinc protects and extends the life of steel. Vedanta is one of the world's leading integrated producers of zinc and lead. Oil fuels the drive behind modern economies and lifestyles. Vedanta Can Oil and Gas is one of India's leading independent energy majors. As India's largest iron ore producer, Vedanta has set a precedent in environmental concern, transforming a used mine site into a beautiful horticultural park.
We at Vedanta are fully committed to explore and to develop these resources in most sustainable manner. This will be a game changer for the economy and will create millions of jobs and eradicate poverty. I'm committed to build a culture, not only the company, the culture built on trust, working together in harmony for the greater good. For me, business is not about accumulating wealth. It's all about giving back to the society.
Very good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining, especially the panelists who have joined and also the chairman and moderator of this session, Mr. Banmali Agarwala. We'll be starting the this particular session shortly at 2:15 sharp. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is Vivek Bansal from VVDN.
Good afternoon, Vivek. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good to see you here.
Same, thank you.
Yeah.
Morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon once again. It's 2:15. We'd like to start the session. Thank you once again for joining this session. Now, without much ado, I would like to hand it over to Mr. Banmali Agarwala, who's going to chair and moderate this session to take it forward. Mr. Banmali, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, Satish. Good
You're on
afternoon.
mute, I guess, Mr. Banmali.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon and good day, everyone. I know we have some people from different parts of the world, so it's really a pleasure and a delight to be here with a very distinguished set of panelists. I think this session on manufacturing is extremely timely. We are all familiar that the thrust that the government of India has put on the subject of manufacturing, and that how, not just in terms of being self-reliant, but also being part of a global ecosystem, part of a global hub. These are some of the things that the government aspires, and frankly, also all the industry that is prevalent within the country. Further, we've also seen the number of geopolitical shifts that are happening in terms of the global supply chain.
which to my mind, I think does spell a significant opportunity as far as manufacturing is concerned, particularly in the context of India. But having said that, what is this new opportunity in manufacturing? How is it going to look like? Is it going to be more of the same from the past, or is it going to be anything different? How are we going to seize the opportunity? Do we have unlimited period of time to simply seize, or do we have a limited window in which we need to make the most of it? Let's try and address some of these questions and more through the panelists that we have. And with the permission of everyone, if I may suggest that I'll go around the panel requesting everyone to kindly share your thoughts initially, maybe in about 5 to 6 minutes. And after that, I think we could then maybe get into a round of question and answers, depending on how much time is left. And of course, on the back of the points that you would have made in the initial opening remarks. So with that, may I first start with Mr. Tyagarajan, who's present over here. He's the managing director of Blue Star Limited, which is a very well-respected and renowned firm in India. Mr. Tyagarajan is also a very active member of CII, and it's really a pleasure and delight to have you with us. Mr. Tyagarajan, of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts, but particularly in the context of, I mean, you have been in manufacturing for all these years. What is it that you are seeing differently? Is the new opportunity any different, and are you approaching it any differently? Mr. Tyagarajan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Yeah, it's a pleasure and privilege to be part of this eminent panel. I think things have changed dramatically over the past 18 months. I would say I have not seen this in my career spanning over 4 decades. Particularly the air conditioning industry, it is going through a great transformation. In that context, this particular panel is of great relevance. You mentioned that whether this opportunity is a short-term one, that window, or it is going to be. I just wanted to share a figure from a McKinsey survey conducted in the middle of last year, where 93% of supply chain leaders are planning to increase resilience in the supply system. 70% expect to change globalization and sourcing strategies soon. 44% would increase resilience, taking a long-term view. 32% are keen to move operation closer to end consumers. In the AC industry, this is dramatically true. And in that context, in India being a country with a minuscule market size, to give an example, the room air conditioner industry in India is around 7 billion units. China is 120 million units. So if we are to compete with China in participating in the global supply chain, you can imagine that scale difference, how it is going to impact our competitiveness. So in that context, the industry has got a PLI scheme in order to go ahead and expand the capacity that will drive the domestic market size, but still in a 3 to 4 year window, if we have to participate in the global supply chain as an alternative to China, we have to do a couple of other things. First is the innovation and R&D, how we can go ahead and ensure our products and the features are different. The second is gaining cost leadership despite not having scale. So I'm excited to be part of this panel, and these are my opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tyagarajan. I think that was really very insightful, and I'm sure we'll come back to you with a few questions after we've done the initial round. May I next turn to Mr. Vivek Bansal, who's the President, Engineering and Co-founder of VVDN Technologies. Vivek, I think you are particularly also engaged in design and manufacturing, which is something that Mr. Tyagarajan just mentioned. So your thoughts on how do you see this opportunity and how are you approaching it from your perspective? Please, the floor is yours. You're on mute, Vivek, I think.
Yeah, thank you, first of all, right? And I think absolutely, we have a huge opportunity of window in front of us right now, right? And talking about VVDN, right, just to give everybody an idea, right? So we are a design-led manufacturing company, right? We started this company 15 years back, invested massively on the electronic product design, right? Where at the time in 2007-8, when nobody believed that India could do hardware, right? We started an hardware ODM out of India, right? And I think last decade or so has been really a tough journey for us. But I think now, given the current scenario and everything, we believe that this was probably one of the best decisions that we took in our life, right? So absolutely, we have a huge opportunity in front of us, right? We at VVDN, we do all sorts of complex electronic product design and going into manufacturing. So anything and everything that we do here is linked to design, and we strongly believe, right, that ultimately we need to have design ownership, in order to be a superpower that we all aspire to be, right? So literally not just encouraging the manufacturing, but we also think that unless you do design, you cannot be cost competitive to China and other parts of the world, right? Time, of course, is very critical, right? And the opportunity of window is literally, the government policies are encouraging geopolitical issues, right? Whatever, right? So the time window is also very short. Next couple of years is super critical for us. So therefore, we really got to perform in next couple of years, right? And that's what I would say, that this is really a huge opportunity window for us, right? And we have to deliver. There's no other alternative in front of India. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vivek. May I now turn to Mr. Sandeep Kumar, who's the co-founder and CEO of Adverb Technologies. And Sangeet, I think you're also into robotics. That's right in the heart of, let's say, new age and automation and all of that. What are your thoughts on manufacturing, and particularly around the subject of getting scale in manufacturing? Your thoughts, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and I'm privileged to be part of this panel. I'll share two things, and this is coming out from the two roles, one role which I am playing right now and one role which I have played in the past. So I was heading this engineering of Asian Paints when we were setting up world's largest paint factory at a single location in 2008. And it taught us a few things about scale. And this was world's largest. So we visited many paint companies, around 100 paint companies across the world, in Europe, US, Japan, etc. And we realized the second largest was half the capacity that we were thinking. So what do we do? Where should we learn from? And because we wanted to not only put world's largest, but world's best in terms of operation, in terms of sustainability. And we said, okay, there were three learnings, and I want to put them one after the other. The first was, when we talk about scale and competitiveness, we don't need to learn only from our industry. The learning can come from any other industry, and that is what we did. After visiting these paint companies, we started visiting a lot of retail companies. We started visiting beverage, which had huge capacity throughput per hour. And this is what, water bottle, 1 liter water bottle per hour, that is the kind of paint we started making in this factory at Rohtak after implementing. So that was one. Second was, we had to unlearn a lot many things. So we we thought that this is the way paint is produced, and we were very confident. We were India's largest, we were Asia's fifth largest, and we said, okay, this is how we know everything, and we have seen it across the world. But when we started discussing scale and the scale which we wanted to put, every assumption was questioned, how raw materials need to be handled at that scale, and whether we need to learn from cement industry, and whether we can convince some of our suppliers to move towards that, so that the scale at which we wanted to operate, we could operate. So that was our other learning. And one of the other, every time we scaled so we kept on doing this every 3 years, building world's largest paint factory, beating our own record. And every time we did it, we moved from, so paint manufacturing was considered as art. And every time we went for scale and competitiveness, it moved from art to engineering. It moved from art to science. And it was made less dependent on people decision when we take these decisions. So this was another important learning which I wanted to share. And third is scale surprises and whatever things we have not thought of as advantage, etc. From when we put up this factory, after that, when we went on putting up other factories, the results, some of these results justified the scale, and which was not thought of initially itself, in terms of conversion costs, in terms of factory level losses, sustainability, etc. So these were the three very, very important learnings which I wanted to share from my earlier role. And the new role, so 6 years back we started, or 5 years back we started Adverb. And Verb is today world's fastest growing warehouse automation and robotics company. We have put up a factory at Noida. We are putting up another factory which would be world's largest factory at a single location for robots. Now, and this is so and to do it in India, it has been a challenge, and the challenge is when we are scaling up to meet or do a catch-up game to someone who has already scaled up, maybe in Europe, maybe in China, maybe in Japan, and that is where I have the learning about scale, a different learning, and which I wanted to share two of them. The first is Mr. Tyagarajan was talking about the scale which is there in China and in India. And same thing is true about robots as well. The density of robots per industrial worker, so per 1,000 of industrial worker, what is there in many countries, we are way back. But one of the things which we decided is India is not only India is our market, okay, 50% of our revenue will come from India, but the whole world is the market. And when we decided that for scale, we also realized that, so every continent, every country has its own standards, which is whether it is CE, UL, Australian standard, and these products which are evolving. It is not something which is already existing. It is continuously evolving, and every country is having its own standard getting modified. Whether it is about the robot safety, whether it is about interoperability of robots, having same fleet management system, etc. So how do you build scale in this case? So same model of yours will not be one robot. One robot. Yes, you can decide to standardize it, but you don't have a luxury to standardize it in today's world. You cannot put cost to the customer. You cannot say I will have one robot for and I will put everything so that it meets C standard, UL standard, every standard, and put up so many components, which makes this equipment costly and not affordable for the end customer. So if you are not going to standardize, the only way to beat it is mass customization, which is what Industry 4.0 talks about, and which is what we have to do. So I am a robotic company. I have to mass customize it. So every product of mine, the manufacturing, the world's largest manufacturing, has to be such that it is extremely flexible and still be cost effective and still produce at a mass level. So that is one challenge which we are grappling with. And in India particularly, the other thing which I wanted to say is the standardization agencies or the certification. It is extremely costly, prohibited. For companies like us, for smaller companies, it would be much. We are still small, but we think we have reached that, or we have crossed that boundary. So that is something which has to come down. And the last point which I wanted to say is, in these upcoming industries, the ecosystem plays a big role when you have to scale up. So either there has to be presence of ecosystem, which certain geography in the world has it, or I need to backward integrate it to have that scale. And we have decided, because the ecosystem is not available, okay, in the long term, we'll continue to support some entrepreneurs, fellow entrepreneurs who can do it. In the short term, we will go for backward integration. And because as someone is saying, we don't have option now. Indian entrepreneurs have to roll up their sleeves to gain this opportunity. That is what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Sangeet. Very insightful indeed, and I'm sure we'll just come back to you in our second round. May I just turn now to Mr. Ernst Pukol. He's the head of Industry 4.0 for the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany. Mr. Pukol, your thoughts, but particularly around the area of digitization and manufacturing. The floor is yours.
Very much, Mr. Agrawala. I'm very pleased to be allowed to say a few words from the German perspective. Dear esteemed panelists, it's really great to have the possibility to add a few comments. You said it already, I'm a little bit more from the field of Industry 4.0 and digitalization. And as my pre-speaker, Sandeep Kumar, said, everything has to be very flexible. We have to do at low cost mass customization, and this is very difficult. And this means you need a lot of enablement of the industry, and you need, I think it's a first point, you need an innovative economy. You need innovative companies, and not single companies who are innovative. You need a network of innovative capacities. I think that's a key. And if it comes to digitalization, it's even more clearer. For the time being, even in Germany, we have a more or less strict organized value chain. But the future will be value networks, where you very flexible will interact with companies, or even machines will speak and even maybe conclude contracts automatically. There will be a lot of big change coming, and everything is about data. Only if you can easily exchange data and know how to use it, then it will be very effective. And you said it before as well, you need interoperability, you need standards to do that, you need an understanding. And next, maybe most important, and this is a challenge everywhere in the world, that you have to enable SMEs to be part of that ecosystems coming up. And that's very difficult, because we can see in Europe or in Germany that big companies have already perfect solutions. They have perfect smart factories, but still it's not connected. There are a lot of solutions, but how it's much too expensive for SMEs to apply such solutions. And last part for the beginning, sustainability. I think sustainability is key. A low CO2 footprint, or even a zero emissions. You have to think about it. How can this be realized? You need digitalization for that. You have to be connected. You need ecosystems. And I think all companies, if big or small, they have to take into account, if they want to be part of the global value chain, that they have to show and to prove their CO2 footprint is very low. And how is this be done? This means we need innovation power. I think that's a key to become resilient and to have growth. That's valid for India, as for Germany, as for Europe. That's for the beginning.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, for those initial comments, Mr. Pakal. May I now turn to Dr. Gunjan Bharadwaj, who's the CEO and founder of Plexus AG and Partex NV. Dr. Bharadwaj, your thoughts, please. By the way, Dr. Bharadwaj, where are you taking this call from? Which part of the world are you in?
From Zug, Switzerland.
You are in Switzerland, yes, that's what I thought. So thank you so much for making the time, and please go ahead.
So I am a German citizen. Of course, I grew up in India, and we have the world's largest digital platform for drug discovery and development. I mean, speaking from Germany, we probably all know here, and Ernst alluded to some of the factors. 50% of the GDP comes from exports, and Germany continues to be the third largest exporter in the world. China around 2.5 trillion, US 1.6, and shortly thereafter is Germany. 60% of the gross value added by Germany comes from international demand. So this pandemic certainly created an impact. And I mean, we all know, as the consumer spending, for instance, in China, it dropped down by 11 to 25% in that range. At the same time, the savings rate in US and Western Europe increased by 10 to 20%. So intrinsically in the manufacturing sector, when we talk to our friends, they are saying there are basically three challenges that they face even now. One is the rebounding demand. So there was sluggishness in demand, and suddenly the demand is surging. But many manufacturers got out of business. They had huge challenges, which the German government kind of supported, and it's a fantastic example with Kurzarbeit, wherein the German government supported the workers when and paying the wages for workers, even when their time of work was reduced by companies to reduce the cost burdens. So one is the rebounding demand, and there, of course, I mean, there are many other aspects. Online demand is increasing faster because people are still in their pandemic phase. Second challenge is with logistics. We had container shortages. We had this big drama in the Suez Canal. There was truckers strikes in the US and now in Canada. And there you're looking at digitization in order to get a grip on the logistical challenges. And the third, very practical, intrinsic challenge in the industry, what we see in Germany, is the pricing pressure. The raw material prices have increased, but you can't pass on that increase to your customers if you're large OEMs, etc. So there is this pressure, this stress on various price points, and people are contemplating. Of course, the inflation rates have been surging, and people are saying there might be a very cataclysmic change in inflation in the near term. And given today's developments in Europe's neighbor, you already saw the oil price surging. This might actually come faster than we anticipate. So these are the three intrinsic challenges, but from a global perspective, when we look at the macro bits, there are three things from Germany that I can talk about. I mean, first, Ernst very well alluded to the sustainability trend. I mean, 73% of Generation Z in Germany is ready to pay more. And how much more? Up to a 10% premium, if the products or services are sustainable. That would mean the suppliers in India will have to, even though I know this reality is a bit far when I travel to India, when we look at our domestic market, sustainability is not an acute premium catcher for the Indian market, but in Europe, this is becoming extremely big. 73% of Generation Z ready to pay a 10% premium. That means we have to make investments today that we are not left behind in the competition to manufacture and be part of this global economy. The second trend is AI and RPA that Sangeet alluded to, and also mentioned in 2020, $1.5 billion were invested in robotic process automation in that 1 year alone. And this is going to increase. But as Sangeet mentioned, and I'm part of this digital working group of CII and BDI, the Indo-German consultations, government consultations, and the biggest challenge are standards. I mean, we have DIP in India. I'll give you one example in healthcare. We have come out with a policy, Disha, AVA, with respect to standards, but still there are many loopholes. You know, we look at data localization in India. RBI has given guidelines. Data has to remain in India. That relates only to financial services. But in other sectors, we don't know what exactly the stand is. And in other cases, I mentioned healthcare. There are standards for patient data, for instance, that are prescribed in the policy, but there is no clarity on whether this data can be commercialized. So you structure data, etc., which is the new oil to train AI, etc., but there is no clarity on whether this could be commercialized. There is no clarity on data localization, and this needs to be addressed. Europe is making progress probably faster on these lines because they have an intrinsic incentive, because they have a big internal market which provides some resilience to, you know, protectionist measures, etc., that are normally associated with crises such as pandemics or, you know, wars. But India has to, if we want to be in this grid of the global economy, especially given RPA and AI is becoming more and more important in manufacturing, we can't do away with not proactively and aggressively looking at standards and interoperability and looking at these policies. The third trend, and I can say, is India or China, and India in capital letters written bold. At least in Germany, also in other parts of Europe, there is an increasing emphasis of looking at India as a natural partner, the value systems, the democracy, the language, the culture, etc., etc. But there is one challenge to it, and that challenge is, and I recently wrote a letter to our chancellor, an open letter that was published in Focus. The image of India is still the image of India that was 40 years old in school books in Germany, in things that are published by the Federal Center of Political Development, the publications that are produced, the way media projects India, it's just way off reality. You know, I graduated in 2005 from IIT Bombay. Even the India then was 30 years ahead of what Germany projects India today in media and in school books. And of course, there as well, Government of India has to, in a very positive way, proactive way, work on the perception and image of India, because, you know, India is important, culture, democracy, that's all good. But in the end, it is the SMEs in Germany, led by humans and families, that would take this call. And if they would grow up with that image, and that image is never corrected, why would they go to India? And this is a real challenge when you talk to many SMEs, and we had some conversations this week. They indeed have a perception of India which is completely skewed. So at a macro level, sustainability, it's not real for India today, but it is real and extremely important in Europe and hence those investments have to be made today. Second, RPA, but standards, interoperability, proactive, aggressive move towards sorting the standards and the policy lacunae that we have. And third, working on the image of India more proactively, more aggressively. And I'm not saying we have to, create some image that's off reality. We just have to bring the right image of the country. And I would quote here the CTO of Deutsche, who is who appreciates India a lot, and he said sometimes when his colleagues feel depressed in one of the India Center events that we have launched at the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, he always tells his colleagues, go to the Frankfurt airport and take a flight to India. You'll come back happy. That kind of dynamism, energy that we feel in India, that's the real India. And that's how Germans and Europeans should see our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, Dr. Bharadwaj. That was really great. You've given me enough fodder for the next round, and I'll come back in a second. Let me, in the first round, now turn to Rahul Garg, who's the founder and CEO of Moglix. And Rahul, your thoughts, of course. Also, I think the point that Dr. Bharadwaj was making on the role of SMEs and how do SMEs actually end up then competing with the larger ones? So please go ahead, Rahul.
Okay, thank you. I think great to be part of this esteemed panel. A bit about, so I represent both a combination of startups working very closely with the manufacturing organizations on how they can drive efficiency for procurement, distribution, and therefore reach out not just to every place in India, but also globally from a distribution standpoint. I think some of the areas, if I was to point out over the last 7 years, as we have been working both with the MSMEs and the large organizations, has been that India has gone through two disruptions, and which have happened, one of them also globally. So the first one was GST, which actually enabled suddenly a lot of the distribution and MSMEs capability to send products, sell products across the country in a far more efficient manner than it was ever possible. And it had multiple ramifications for it, because there is an element of how do you optimize logistics. There is an element of how do you enable MSMEs on sales. There is a element of how do you enable these MSMEs to procure effectively. There is also an element of will they go down a path of building out the sales, distribution, all of those networks in a physical world, or can they use digital or technology as the starting point of distribution for many of these products? Because for these MSMEs to grow, in fact, we feel that one of the core sort of elements that have happened over the last 5 years is that they have realized the power of digital distribution. They have realized that there can be platforms like us in B2B, there are platforms in consumer space. Many of these MSMEs catering to any of these product categories are no longer dependent on having national sales forces, national logistics to be built out in a old school way, but they can start to use many of these platforms to distribute both in India and globally. So I think that is a one very large disruption, because I know early on you spoke about why now, why this is the moment for India to capture. And the second, I think the largest disruption I also see is the COVID, where every single sort of conversation that we have gone to now, India and quite a few of places globally, it was an eye-opener for us when wave 1 was happening and slightly before wave 1 of COVID. Moglix actually supported, and probably that was one of the largest exercises in Jan and February by many of the companies, where India was the epicenter of supplying PPE supplies to many parts of the world because China's factories were down. And I think that started a wake-up call, not just in terms of PPE supplies, but in terms of the entire healthcare industry, how the vaccination has been sort of produced at a phenomenal rate and scale in India, and continues to actually spread across multiple industries. If I look at today, talking to most large manufacturers, and we think, while we talk about MSMEs, we feel that every single large manufacturing plant coming up in the country enables a massive MSME ecosystem to be built. So it's not either or, because one manufacturing plant by Maruti in Manesar or in Gujarat enables hundreds of MSMEs to be developed in that cluster, which are serving towards the B2B needs of a very large manufacturing plant being set up, or something being set up in defense. I mean, you start to have indigenization of many of the defense products in the country. There is one large plant leading to many MSMEs. So I think over the last 2 years, we have seen that entire significant positive momentum, both by Indian entrepreneurs, capital markets, to invest into capex in India for manufacturing sector. And I think this is probably the largest tailwind we can get as a country for serving firstly the domestic needs of the country, because we realize that for many of the things, India, given the population size, needs, so on and so forth, need to be completely self-reliant, and most evident in pharma, but in many other sectors as well, that India needs to be self-reliant because we have a large population and we have large requirement that we need to cater to, and we cannot be stuck into a COVID scenario where we can have international supply chain disruption. And the second thing is, again, a very strong, just like we had in 80s, a low-cost country wave where many of the manufacturing shifted from US, Europe to maybe China. We see a growing second sort of direction where people are, for multitude of reasons. I mean, some of it is purely diversification of risks. Some of that are purely what is going to be the geopolitical scenario. And the third, do they believe for the goals that they are trying to achieve, are they going to be able to achieve that without any disruption in future? I think the sustainability element that was being talked about early on by Dr. Gunjan as well. I mean, many of the conversations, people are, yes, not in India though yet. Nobody is willing to pay premium yet in India for sustainable products being used. People want it at the same price. So it is one of the toughest market, therefore, to compete in those products. But many of our international conversations have been about how can you deliver sustainable products, and I'm willing to pay a premium for it. And India will and has a unique opportunity over the next 5 years. It is not going to go away. We don't think it's a short-term spiky phenomena. I think this opportunity is here to stay for next 5 to 10 years for us to become the second largest manufacturing hub in the world, not just for the country needs, but also for supplying to rest of the world. And I would believe that there will be an important role, because this will not be developed in the old school fashion, both from sales and distribution perspective, procurement perspective, thinking about building new manufacturing plants with the level of automation, AI, so on and so forth. So this is going to be a lot of fresh thinking and a lot of build-up that will happen over the next 5 years. And with all the policies, I think one of the policies we talk quite frequently is the PLI, but we believe there is a very strong momentum in terms of attracting capital into the country as well for building many of these infrastructure, many of these joint ventures of technology, and many of these digital and physical highways to enable this momentum in India. And we are super excited to be part of it and playing a small role in it.
Thank you, Rahul. I'm not sure if that is small. I think it is very significant, and the way you articulate it, it's very impactful indeed. So first, thank you everyone for those comments. Now, as we go around in the second round of questions, I'm going to take the liberty of being provocative. So this was easy, simple, but I'm now going to put you in a spot and force you to take positions on uncomfortable questions so that we really get the sense and juice of what is going. So, Mr. Tyagarajan, since you are the veteran on this panel, may I start with you? You spoke about China. You spoke about the scale of China and India. We all understand the geopolitical side of whatever's going on in China. But let's for a second keep that geopolitics aside. Maybe it's not going to last forever, right? So it's going to come back. How on earth are we ever going to be able to compete with that machine called China on that scale, on that speed, and everything that it does? Your thoughts, please.
Great provocation, Mr. Garbala. First I wanted to also, make a small correction on what Rahul mentioned, that we will be second manufacturing hub. My understanding is, and my belief is, my conviction is, we will be number one in many categories, and it is possible. There is a clear evidence we will be ahead of China in manufacturing in quite a few categories. To answer your question, number one is the domestic market growth. I'll tell you, for consumer durables, as a percentage of GDP, that is consumer expenditure in durables as a percentage of GDP in India is 1.95%, and it is hovering around 6 to 11 in other countries. So there is a latent potential in the domestic market. The second is, we are all looking at, quite a few of us are looking at the PLI as the end of the story. I don't think PLI should be used as a ever game changer. It is one lever to kickstart. Now, whatever is invested as PLI will get diluted in the prices eventually, because in order to earn a PLI, you have to do a incremental sales. Therefore, I can predict in a category like even air conditioners, the prices are going to come down, because all of us, having invested, will have to show incremental growth in order to earn the PLI. Eventually, that money is going to the consumers' pockets. So therefore, the domestic market will grow. This is the second part of it. Third, I mentioned I fall back on innovation and R&D. India's R&D expenditure, you are aware very well, that is 0.7% of GDP. Japan at 3.3, China at 2.2, US at 2.8, Germany at 3.1, Israel at 5% of the GDP. No way India will succeed with this kind of R&D expenditure. We have to, private sector as well as government will have to invest in innovation and R&D. If you trace the history of Japan or Korea or US, the growth and the R&D, there is a clear correlation. South Korea grew when their R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP went up, or China grew when the R&D expenditure went up. This innovation is important for bringing down not only the cost and also offering innovative features to differentiate the products, but also your manufacturing. Today we are finding it for the first time in AC industry, the plants that are set up. I'll tell you the history. We were all gypsies. From Dadra, we will move to Himachal, to Northeast, wherever some custom duty is there. 2 years, we will fool around there, or 5 years, like that. Today, to set up a 1 million, 2 million unit, you don't have resources even. You don't know those manufacturing processes. You don't have the capacity to deliver that Industry 4.0 implementation. So we have to create the leaders in manufacturing as well as R&D in order to cope with this new world of scale. And come to this part of it, India is good in that frugal innovation of figuring out how to reduce the cost. But we have to now go systematically. Some of the Tata companies have done extremely well in terms of design to value processes, or in terms of zero-based costing, in redefining the supply chain, the partnership ecosystem. Say, for example, VVDN. Yeah, Blue Star is expected to create that relationship with the ecosystem or the MSMEs across, in order to ensure that I am no longer dependent on international sources for sourcing the components, actually. So this will be the next part of it. Next is that you need to invest in brand. That Gunjan mentioned just now, that what is the perception of Germany on India. So not only Government of India, individually, we should go ahead and invest in brand building across. Now, the sustainability part of it, okay, we may have disappointments. The 10% premium in Germany or other countries, people are ready to pay Gen Z. That is because they have the spending power. In India, it will happen. Mark my words. In about 5 years, Indian young generation also will be ready to pay for sustainability, and we have I often fall back on missions like Chandrayaan or the Mars mission, where India could demonstrate at a low cost, at a faster cycle time, we can do even a space mission. So it should be possible for us to compete and participate in the global value chain despite we are minuscule. I'm telling you, 7 million room air conditioners versus 120 million room air conditioners. We are able to match the prices more or less even today in the landed cost. At a later landed cost means you are paying a custom duty, but at a later date, I estimate in 3 years' time, we will be able to beat China there. So therefore, my belief is it should not be seen as a formidable thing. We have to have the faith, but the basic building blocks, we should not move away at all. Like, if we are investing in a manufacturing unit of some 3 acres, 2 acres won't do. We should come forward to do despite the interest costs in the country are high. We should invest only in R&D innovation, only in branding. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Mr. Tyagarajan, just to kind of, just as a follow-up on that, so as you said, keep the faith. There's a huge list of, points that we should be, I think we've been saying this now for a decade, if not even more. Why aren't we doing it?
So there was a comfort, right? That there was you can always import from China and quickly build the businesses. Now there is a threat. You will never be able to do it. If you want to survive, you have to do. That's about all. Period. That's where it is. There was the extreme comfort level that was there that you can, and also in R&D, most of our R&D was reverse engineering in the country. Now you have to end up doing the core R&D itself. Now look at the industry academia. We were not paying attention. Now growing attention will be paid. And I am extremely pleased that MSME, startups, and the unicorns are coming forward to help us achieve this import substitution.
Right. Great. So you do see movement that is happening. I mean, that's what I take from what you're saying. Mr. Pukal, if I may turn to you, I think one of the points that came up earlier on was on the subject of digitization, the need to have common standards, data privacy, data localization, etc., etc. Now, we all know this perhaps is one of the most contentious subjects, maybe right across the world, even between the US and Europe and other parts. I mean, there's just no commonality in thought process. I did hear Dr. Bharadwaj, in a sense, say, are we in India being too conservative about our data privacy laws and so on? So my question to you is, first, do you think it is feasible and practical that the whole world will have a common platform when it comes to usage of data? Number one. Number two, if data is the new oil, what is wrong for a country like India to say, look here, this data that we produce in large quantum is valuable, and therefore we need to make sure that we are able to extract enough value from it for our own country? Your thoughts? You're on mute, Mr. Pukal.
Very much. I think it's possible to exchange data and to use data. But first, your question was, will there be this interoperability? What about, will there be a single platform in the world for exchanging data? No, definitely not. Everything will be decentralized. That's the key. For the time being, we have, for example, with the hyperscalers and the cloud computing, we have 3, 4, 5 big companies really, how should I say, they are really holding the biggest part in the world market, like Amazon Web Service or Google or Microsoft. That's not bad in itself, but we have not full interoperability. And there we are again at standards. We have no, if you see the offers of those companies, they are great, they're fantastic, yeah, and they will be used, and we all want to have them. But it's not very transparent, yeah. You can't see what's really in the market, and this means those hyperscalers and that say even European companies who are acting like hyperscalers. I don't want to, how should I say, to be against them, not at all. But what we need is this interoperability, that we have a network which is interoperable, that the upcoming edge, for example, we have edge clouds in companies. They have to be interoperable with the central clouds, with other clouds. We need to have a network. This does not exist. We don't have the standards for this kind of interoperability. We are working in Europe in many fields to change that. One is Gaia X, which is complex and maybe not well understood so far in the world. It's the very beginning, this project, but it had already a big effect, because what do we want to do? We need to understand how to share data. Yeah, it's not about just there's a data lake and to take data out of it. That does not help so much. Yeah, but if you really want to increase or to have new business models in the world, there will be data-based, and then you have to exchange data. But you only are ready, and that's I think the same in India as in Germany. Companies are only ready to share data if they know what they get out of it, if they know what's going on with the data, if they can trust it, because otherwise they might lose a lot of knowledge and know-how, and their IPR might be violated if they are unleaked. So you need a system which builds that trust, and which is easy to use. You have to exchange data more or less automatically, but so you need systems to trust. Yeah. And what we are doing now in Europe in the industry, which is coming more and more, to create data spaces, to understand how data spaces, how do they work, how can they be used, what will be the business models. I give you a quite simple example. Traceability of products or CO2 footprint. How do you want to calculate the CO2 footprint if you don't know how to exchange data? Yeah. This transparency, this trustfulness has to be created. And this is an extremely difficult task. We in Europe believe that if we manage to do that, we can be competitive in the next industrial age, which will be definitely digitalized. Yeah? And there is something you said, coming back to the beginning, will we see a single platform? No. We need to have a lot of open source. Yeah, we should not compete on the whole stack. Yeah, we have to, how should I say, we have to compete, for example, on the software part. Yeah, how to develop business models. Yeah, in an interoperable system. I think there is a big strength in India. You have so many IT engineers who exactly know how to do that. If you combine this understanding with what is going on in the industrial sector, then you have a lot of opportunities. Maybe a last word. I think we should not look always only on one production side. It's always the complete value chain from cradle to cradle. And this is really changing rapidly, and it's a challenge I think, for the whole world. And to do this in a way that our economies become more resilient, but not, how should I say, blocked to other countries. Yeah, we want this openness and resilience. I think this is the biggest challenge, and I think all of you got the news of the Ukraine, what happened, and for me it's still a shock today. Yeah, just to say so. Yeah, so we have to keep this interoperability and this understanding.
So, Mr. Pukal, just as a follow-up for that, I get your point. But once again, I think this is a subject which is being discussed, endlessly. It's more maybe a state kind of discussion across countries and so on. Do you think industry, maybe in Europe and elsewhere, is encouraging government to be more closed and protective, or is it encouraging government to be open?
At least Europe, we want to have this openness. That's very, very important. When we talk, sometimes we use this word now, strategic autonomy, which means you need to have certain production, certain capabilities, for example, in the microelectronics, or when it comes to cloud technologies, yeah, or when it comes to quantum technologies and so on. If you really want to be at the forefront of an industry, you have to understand those technologies. You have to certain capabilities you need to develop and to keep the standard. Yeah, that's very clear. But that does not mean that that's only us who we want to produce only our own microchips in Europe. That would be nonsense, yeah. But we should have the capability and understanding to understand the complete processes.
Understood. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Bharadwaj, if I may turn to you, I don't know if you're still on the call.
I'm there.
You there? Right. You spoke about ESG and the willingness for premiums, etc., that, you know, in Europe and maybe Germany as well. How do you factor in the dimension of affordability in ESG, particularly coming from the context of the emerging world, the emerging market? How do you factor in legacy related issues? Because making a transition, I mean, it's easy to start something new, but, you know, there's also a question of transition from legacy into something different. And again, with my how should I say, my drive to be provocative in this round, is ESG being used as a rod to hit the emerging markets with?
See, ESG, in my view, you know, has to do with 2-3 elements. One is, you know, it's a capital markets fad. I mean, grossly put, there are many funds that would invest in you if you tick marks on I think it's Article 8, Article 7, you know, have to be compliant. So, you know, many listed companies or wannabe listed companies, they are all, you know, want that kind of a certification. There are many ESG funds that are out there, etc. The second, the social dimension, I believe, is exactly what you said. I can relate to it. Coming in from India, doing my undergrad there, I think at least Western Europe, in all openness, and I sometimes tell my German friends, I said, when I came in 2005, the kind of generation I saw in terms of working hard, etc., was a completely different generation. And now the Generation Z that's coming up, you know, they want work-life balance, they want to save the nature, the climate, and, you know, because they have the luxury of plenty. The state supports you. The German state doesn't let anyone fall. You know, it's an amazing thing. It's one of the most wonderful welfare states in the world, in terms of medical coverage, etc. So everyone is protected. And if you have that mindset, you have the time, you don't have daily struggles, you have the time to be wired around that. And, you know, I told you what Deutsche Post actually published in a study. 73% of Generation Z folks are ready to pay a 10% premium if things come from sustainable means. We don't have that luxury. So what do we need to do? We need to provide our narrative. We need to make people aware that, you know, we are coming after, you know, from being nowhere, after liberalization, and, you know, 200 years of colonial rule and 1,000 years, you know, we are building everything from scratch. That's our legacy, and that's exactly what I also alluded to, that Indian government has to very proactively also help create that awareness.
Yeah. So do I also hear you say, as you said, this is more maybe something coined by investors or maybe consultants. I'm not even sure as to what is common between E, S, and G. How do you deal with it, you know, as you know, as a center of excellence, or, you know, so maybe, you know, maybe you can help me to understand that a little bit. Also, do I also hear you say that, is it too elitist? And by the way, even though I'm being provocative, don't get me wrong, because I'm sure you're aware of all the different steps that India has taken despite its constraints in kind of furthering the cause. I won't kind of give a spiel of that, but I'm sure you're familiar with it. But to address my question, what is even common between E and S and G? And is this just a fad that is being unnecessarily and unduly imposed, particularly on manufacturing, which perhaps is the most vulnerable to quote unquote S and G? Your thoughts, please.
So it all started with from an Indian, Professor Amartya Sen. You know the concept of instrumental freedoms: environment, social, political, economic, and transparency guarantees. These are the 5 instrumental freedoms he proposed, based on which the Human Development Index, was conceptualized, and eventually, on the sustainability front. And there is a lot of work, Elkington, etc. I wouldn't go into that. And people realized, our economic activity should kind of reduce the future deadweight loss, public deadweight loss, which would be caused by harming the society, environment, or curbing those instrumental freedoms. So this concept is very nice, especially if you are, the world's biggest economy, or second, third biggest economy. But for a country that has to feed 1.4 billion people, that's starting and has to find employment and has to set up manufacturing from scratch, one has to realize that it can't be done overnight. But the good thing is, I think this realization, there would be a sense of convergence. I mean, with all the debt the countries have taken, and the printing of money. I mean, people are already saying the interest rates. It's just a matter of time, and the extent to which they would be raised. And first, typically, they would be raised by US, and then the ECB would follow, because most of it, and then the economies will start feeling the pinch. You would see many countries that were very vehement supporters of lockdowns, etc., are now saying, let's have a freedom day or whatever, because the hit has been hard. And I think there would be some realization, or some steam would kind of escape the pressure. But I still believe we are not really working on that perception, management, creation, awareness, as we should be working on.
Yeah,
there is a huge deficit there.
I think that's a very important and strong point that you've made, and I think that's a well-made point. And especially from your vantage point, I think you perhaps can sense that much better than us, sitting in India. So that's really crucial. Rahul, if I may turn to you, and I mean, you spoke about the SMEs and so on, and my question is, do SMEs, would they necessarily have to ride only on the back of the larger companies, as perhaps as what you were saying, and also the expectations from government, are they too much? I mean, are we asking too much from government, that all the time, hold my hand, give me money, give me subsidies, give me support, I can't otherwise kind of survive? Are we asking for too many crutches that it doesn't really enable us to stand on our own feet? Your thoughts, Rahul?
So firstly, I think it's not either or. I think SMEs can stand by themselves. In fact, we are seeing increasingly SMEs which also produce finished goods. Typically, SMEs which can stand by themselves are more companies which can deliver finished goods. Obviously, there is the entire ancillary ecosystem which gets established around OEMs, which is where. So depending on the category of products that you're dealing with, it can be centered around the large mother hub kind of ecosystem, or it can be independent. The beauty that I spoke about was that in past, SMEs would struggle because they would not have the kind of distribution ecosystems to grow their sales, and therefore they would always sort of remain subscale. I think we are going to, over the next 5 years, see many of the SMEs which might be sitting at 10 crore turnover, 20 crore turnover, starting to become 50 crore, 100 crore, so on and so forth, because they will have digital distribution that is available to them, which can enable them not only to sell across various parts of the country, but globally. The second point which you said, are we asking too much from the government or the expectation from the government? I think just like it has happened in many sectors and not just, I would say, SMEs, but I feel the government plays a lot of role on generating a positive environment where people start to invest and believe in the future. And I think that is happening today with the government policies every single time. Because if SMEs by themselves start to believe that there is a positive future for which they can be doing capex investment, they can be getting access to, I think in this budget, there was a talk about enabling liquidity flow, because 2 years were kind of painful for SMEs on capex investments, on working capital, but enabling a certain level of financial instruments so that SMEs can actually not just raise those equity or debt instruments and invest into capex, invest into building new R&D products, as Mr. Tyagarajan was pointing out. I think that is going to be the future. And I think that positive momentum is there. I mean, I think while many of them felt in 2020, this is kind of the end of the world and they will have all of this sort of debt crunches and so on and so forth. But I think there is a very strong sort of positive momentum on investment in SMEs.
Thanks, Rahul. I think, Sangeet, if I may turn to you, and I think you spoke about, the need to have scale. You gave examples, your own personal examples of having managed scale and so on. My question to you is, should we be looking at manufacturing also in terms of just creating more number of jobs, or is the quality of job more important than the number of jobs? And are we maybe making a mistake by looking at manufacturing with the lens of just creating more number of jobs and thereby diluting all that we've discussed so far around ESG, around innovation, around productivity, et cetera, et cetera? Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I am a strong believer of creating quality jobs, and so I'll go for it. But that might not be the right answer for India, and we will figure it out in some years from now. But I strongly believe that the quality of job that we create is very, very important. And so that is where so it is, all these things are linked. And we were Tyagarajan sir was talking about brand, what kind of brand I create, what kind of looks and aesthetics is there of the product, and what kind of software and what kind of software we embed with these products. And this is where the value addition comes, and these value addition is what gets respected and paid for by global clients. And if I have to do that, then I need to have people who have certain kind of skills, or either people who are trained and comes to the industry, or I train them in-house. But that the quality of job that they do, and so that they do in building that product or adding the value, that is very, very important, and that is what we should be looking at. These and there are several industries which are coming up, the new industries which were not even new products, which were not there, or the products. Every product today is becoming a software. AC, for example, is something which is a software to me, at least. And there we need to add value, and that can come only from people who are skilled and who can.
Yeah. And Sangeet, just as a follow-up on that, especially when talking about scale, are you able to find enough talented, or let's say skilled people for your purpose out there? Or do you feel there's a shortage of skilled and talented people?
So for us, we are able to find people, and it is because our value addition. So there is a robot, but robot is not electromechanical equipment. It is a software, and both has to. And the addition, the value addition, and which is what Mr. Pukal was talking about. Our strength, the country's strength is software. So how do I mix this electromechanical strength with software strength to make us competitive? So we are able to find talent, and what we are doing as a company, and what so we have grown from 0 to 550. Next year we will be 1,000 people. But what we are able to do in our company is the software people to appreciate the nuances of electromechanical equipment, and that is something which we are teaching people. And electromechanical people, they are well aware of what software can do to a product, so at least in India, and that is something which is helping us. Yes, at diploma level and ITI level, we need more people, but right now it is all engineers and engineers. So I think we are able to get.
Sure. Thanks, Sangeet. And Vivek, if I may turn to you, since you are also into design and so on, and we've spoken about the need to have IP and all the nice stuff about innovation and so on, how do you practically see it on the ground? Are we doing enough? Do you still see a substantial movement in that space, or there's a lot of talk but very little action on the ground?
Yeah, so I think I have mixed thoughts about that, right? Of course, on one side, I see a lot of new tech startups, right, coming up, right? A lot of hardware startups coming up, right? And that really encourages us that looking at that the fact is, I mean, the ecosystem is growing in the country, right? See, as VVTN, right, we personally actually believed big time into the story of India manufacturing, right? And we have made massive investments, right? I mean, if you come and see our facility, it's literally one of the best in the country, best of manufacturing lines, best of R&D facilities, right? Massive investments we have done. And we believed, right, that to create innovative products, you have to make, those kind of investments, right? Now, like I said, right, so we really get encouraged looking at what some of the new startups, right, new age startups are doing, right, and we are seeing few successful use cases like what Adverb is doing. There's another company, Natrodyne, that we are partnered with, right. There are quite a few hardware tech startups, right, who have come up and they have become unicorns of the world, right, and they have done good, right. But at the same time, there is a huge surge of, the whole CKD, SKD business, right? Which is kind of, just to fake around the whole government policy of manufacturing in India, right? See, the government intention of doing manufacturing in India was ultimately we create products in India and we manufacture here, right? But I think, some of the entrepreneurs like us, right, have circumvent, find workarounds, and we are bringing kits from outside and doing that, right? So that side of story is a little discouraging. But when I look at some of the companies who are now investing into R&D, into manufacturing, into product design, that really encourages us, right? And personally, we believe that the only way we could be sustainable, right? We talk about so much, not just manufacturing for India, but also exports and everything, right? That's only going to happen if you create products here locally in the country, right? You have to be 100% sustainable. The design ownership has to be here. The IP ownership has to be here, right? So we are, so that's what we are promoting, and of course we are supporting several other startups, right, who are getting into the space, right? So we want to support as much ecosystem as possible, right? Yeah.
Wonderful. Vivek, thank you so much for that. I think we've come right on dot towards the end of the time that was allocated to us. So let me first, while I'm just trying to conclude this at the outset, I do apologize to all of you for being pushing you or being a little provocative, but the idea was to, just get the best out from you. And I think I've achieved that. You've spoken freely, you've really spoken your mind and gave some very, very, very tangible insights. Let me just summarize in about 3 or 4 points the way I understand it. Number one, it is absolutely timely that the government and we as a country in India have recognized the importance of manufacturing. Today, I think it's just about less than 15% of the total share of the economy. It needs to be anywhere more than 25%. And we've seen all over the world that if manufacturing is not a substantial part of the construct of the overall economy, you lose as a country the ability to think, to innovate, and to kind of make progress. So that's phenomenal. Number two, we need to recognize that the new age of manufacturing is different from the old age of manufacturing. It is not for us in India to be doing more of the same that we have been doing, but there are a number of newer areas that have come up that are more relevant for the world, and that is what we need to embrace. It is not just India for India, but clearly we need to be part of that global ecosystem. And I think, as also what Mr. Tyagarajan was saying, we can only get those volumes and numbers if we cater to the global markets. Third, I think it is time also that we look at manufacturing as a high margin, high value added sector, not a trading kind of a business with very low conversion margins. We will need those margins not for making just profits into the hands of owners, but to plow back into further innovation. And the point I think that Dr. Bharadwaj was also making in meeting and fulfilling the requirements and the desires of people when it comes to ESG. ESG is expensive, it costs money, and that money can only come if we are able to innovate more enough and get people to kind of pay more. So I think we need to look at manufacturing more as a high value add rather than simply a low commoditized kind of a business. Last point on this, and 2 points I'd make on this, or last 2 points, is that to my mind and in my experience, it ultimately boils down to people. And therefore, my question around people, I think we still need to work a little more in kind of creating the right mindset. And it's more about creating the right attitude than just the right skill set. I think we need to. So it's not just about knowing how to do engineering, but how do you manage engineering? How do you manage innovation? I think those are areas where we need to do much better so that then I think, as many of you have said, we will have IP, know-how, patents, etc. that are made in India, because we need to know when you stop doing something and start doing something else, and so on and so forth. Finally, I was really taken up by the point that Dr. Bharadwaj made, that how is India seen from the outside world? And I would just like to conclude by saying that I think it is time India is seen not as a low-cost country which operates sweatshops of people doing, work in factories, but it's a country where you can do on scale, high value added work, which can kind of cater to all the global markets. And this perception of India of being a high value added destination in terms of catering to the global requirement, I think is extremely important. And Satish, I think that is the task that you have as CII to make sure that that image of India changes and changes fast enough. Okay. With that, may I thank all the panelists and participants for really engaging, being honest, being truthful in your answers. It really helps the discussion. And I indeed thank you very much for your time, which of course I know is extremely precious. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you. On behalf of all the panelists and the participants, Mr. Banmali, thank you for chairing and moderating this session in your own very unique and interesting way. Thank you, fellow panelists. Have a good evening. It was a good session. We look forward to being in touch and taking forward some of the recommendations that emanated not only from this session, but during the course of discussions through the entire conclave that was held during the course of the day. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.